The diary fell open in my hands like it had been waiting for me. I didn't mean to read it, not really. I was just clearing out the attic, pushing through dust and old boxes that smelled like cedar and thyme, the kind of smell that clings to your clothes and follows you downstairs. But then I saw it. Small, leather-bound, the edges worn soft like something held too many times. And when it slipped open, I saw the first line. I never loved your grandfather. I swear to you, the air changed. It got colder. Not the kind of cold you feel on your skin, the kind that settles somewhere behind your ribs. My fingers tightened around the pages, like if I let go, the truth might disappear back into the past where it belonged. Because my grandmother, she wasn't just anyone. She was the glue. The Sunday dinners, the soft humming in the kitchen, the warm hands that fixed everything without ever asking for credit. 47 years of marriage, and not once did anyone doubt her love for him. And yet, there it was, in her own handwriting. I remember sitting down right there on the attic floor. Didn't even brush the dust away. My knees just gave out like my body knew before my mind could catch up. The wooden boards creaked under me, and for a moment, that was the only sound I could hear. Then I kept reading. My heart belonged to someone else. It always did. I had to stop. I couldn't breathe right. It felt like I was trespassing on something sacred, or maybe something buried for a reason. My grandmother had been gone for 3 months. We buried her in the same cemetery as my grandfather, side by side, like the perfect story everyone believed in. But this wasn't that story. The pages trembled in my hands, or maybe it was me. I looked around the attic like someone might catch me, like she might somehow appear and gently take the diary back, smile that knowing smile and say, "Some things aren't meant to be read, sweetheart." But she didn't. So I read on. She wrote about a summer in 1968, about a boy with a laugh that felt like sunlight through broken clouds, about long walks by the river, about promises whispered under stars that probably don't even shine the same way anymore. And then, one line that made my chest tighten. I chose safety over love. I closed the diary for a second, pressing it against my chest like I could quiet it, like I could quiet everything it was waking up inside me. Because suddenly, all those memories, her soft eyes, her quiet sighs when she thought no one was looking, they started to feel different, like maybe she had been carrying something heavy all along. I opened it again. I had to. He came back for me the day before my wedding. That's when my hands started to shake for real. I could almost see her then, not as the grandmother I knew, but as a young woman standing at some crossroads with her whole life in front of her. A choice, a real, tearing, impossible choice, and she didn't choose love. Or maybe she chose something harder. The attic felt smaller now, the walls closer. Like the past wasn't behind me anymore, it was right there, breathing over my shoulder. And I realized, sitting there with that diary in my lap, I didn't just open a book, I opened a life I never knew existed. You have to understand, she wasn't just my grandmother. She was the kind of person who made a house feel alive. Even before you stepped through the door, you could smell her. Fresh bread, a little cinnamon, and something warm you couldn't quite name. It clung to the curtains, to the old wooden cabinets, to the sweaters she folded with that quiet care. I used to sit at her kitchen table, legs swinging, watching her move like she had all the time in the world. Slow, certain, like nothing could ever shake her. She'd hum sometimes, soft, old tunes I never recognized, but they stuck in your head anyway, like they belonged there. And when she looked at you, really looked, it felt like she saw everything, not just who you were, but who you were trying to be. "Come here, sweetheart," she'd say, patting that same chair every time like it was mine and no one else's. I'd tell her things I never told anyone, not my parents, not my friends. Little fears, big dreams, stupid mistakes that felt like the end of the world back then. And she never judged, not once. She'd just listen, hands wrapped around her coffee mug, eyes soft but steady. Then she'd lean in a little and say something simple, something that didn't sound like advice until it stayed with you for years. "You don't rush a life," she told me once. "You live it, even the hard parts." Back then, I thought she was just wise. Now, I wonder what she was remembering. Because there were moments, small ones, you could almost miss if you weren't paying attention. Like when she'd pause while washing dishes, staring out that kitchen window just a second too long. Or when someone mentioned my grandfather, her smile would come, but slower, like it had to travel a long way to reach her face. I didn't question it. Why would I? To me, they were perfect, the kind of love people talk about like it's rare. Long marriage, shared jokes, quiet understanding. The way she'd set his chair just right before dinner, even years after he passed, like he might still walk in and sit down. I remember asking her once, real casual, "Did you ever fall in love before, Grandpa?" She laughed, light, easy, but her eyes, they didn't laugh with her. "Oh, honey," she said, brushing it off, "life isn't a storybook." And that was it. She changed the subject, asked me about school, about my plans, just like that, smooth, practiced. I didn't think twice, but I remember the way her fingers tightened around the table, just for a second, just enough to notice if you were looking. And I was always looking. I just didn't understand what I was seeing. She had this way of holding you when you hugged her, not loose, not quick, firm, like she was memorizing you, like she knew something about time that the rest of us didn't know. "Stay a little longer," she'd whisper sometimes, and I always did, because being around her felt safe, like no matter how loud the world got, her kitchen was quiet, steady, unshaken. But now, when I think back on those afternoons, on the way the light came through the window and settled on her face, I can't help but feel it, that quiet under everything. Not sadness exactly, not regret you could name, just something unfinished. I trusted her before I even knew what trust meant. Not the kind you say out loud, the quiet kind. The kind that lives in your bones, like knowing the floor will hold you when you take a step. That was her. I remember one night, storm outside, real heavy rain hitting the windows like handfuls of gravel, thunder rolling low like the sky was dragging something across itself. I must have been 7, maybe 8, couldn't sleep, heart pounding for no good reason except the dark felt too big. I padded down the hallway, bare feet cold against the wooden floor, and there she was, sitting in the kitchen, just sitting. Lights low, a single lamp glowing soft beside her, casting long shadows that didn't feel scary with her there. She didn't even turn when I walked in. "Bad dreams?" she asked, like she already knew. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me yet. "Come here." That chair again, always that chair. I climbed up, and she wrapped that old knitted shawl around my shoulders. It smelled like lavender and something older, like time itself had settled into it. Her hand found the back of my head, slow and steady, not rushing, not fixing, just there. "You're safe," she said. Simple words, but the way she said them, they didn't feel like comfort. They felt like truth. And I believed her, completely. That's how it always was. School problems, scraped knees, broken friendships. Everything led back to her kitchen, her voice, her way of making the world smaller, softer, manageable. She never raised her voice, never made things bigger than they were, even when I did. I once lied to her, stupid thing, told her I hadn't broken a vase when I clearly had. I was shaking, waiting for that look, that disappointment adults always carry like a weapon. But she just looked at me, not angry, not even surprised. She asked, "Are you sure that's the truth?" That was it. No lecture, no punishment, Just that question hanging there between us, like a mirror I couldn't look away from. I remember my throat tightening, chest heavy, the lie sitting inside me like a stone. "I'm sorry," I whispered. She nodded, slow, almost as if she expected it all along. "Truth has a way of finding its way out," she said. "Better it comes from you." And somehow I felt lighter, like she hadn't just forgiven me, she'd taught me something without making me feel small. That was her gift. She made you want to be better without ever telling you you weren't enough. I used to watch her hands a lot. Wrinkled, yes, but steady. Always doing something, kneading dough, folding laundry, tracing the rim of her coffee cup like she was thinking about something far away. Sometimes I'd catch her staring at old photographs, not smiling, just looking. "Who's that?" I asked. And when she hugged me, really hugged me, it felt like being anchored, like no matter how far I drifted, I could always find my way back to her. That kind of trust, it doesn't come easy. It's built over years, quiet moments, unspoken understanding, and I gave it to her completely, without ever wondering what she might have been carrying all along. It wasn't supposed to be that day. I was just up there to clear things out, that's all. The attic had been sitting untouched since we buried her, boxes stacked like quiet witnesses, air thick with dust and old summers. Every step I took stirred up that dry, papery smell, the kind that settles in your throat and makes you feel like you shouldn't be breathing too deep. Sunlight slipped through the small window, cutting the room into sharp, golden lines. I remember thinking how still everything felt. Too still, like the house itself was holding its breath. I almost missed it, tucked behind an old wooden trunk, half hidden under a faded quilt. That trunk, God, I knew it. She used to keep winter blankets in there, wrapped tight with care. But this was different, smaller, personal. I pulled the quilt back, and a thin cloud of dust rose up, slow and soft, like something waking after a long sleep. And there it was, a diary. Not new, not something you'd leave lying around. The leather was cracked, edges softened by time and touch. The kind of thing you hold on to, not for years, but for a lifetime. My first instinct? Put it back. I swear I almost did. My fingers just hovered there, barely brushing the cover. It felt wrong, like stepping into a room you were never invited into, like hearing a conversation not meant for you. My chest tightened, and for a second I actually looked over my shoulder, like she might be there, standing in that quiet way she had, watching. "Some things aren't yours to carry," she used to say, but she wasn't there. Just silence, thick and heavy. So I picked it up. The leather felt cool in my hands, colder than it should have been. I remember running my thumb along the edge, feeling the tiny ridges where pages had been turned over and over again. Loved or needed. I sat down right there on the floor, didn't think about the dust or the heat or anything else, just that diary in my lap, heavier than it had any right to be. I told myself I'd just look at the first page, just enough to know what it was. Maybe recipes, old notes, something simple, something safe. But deep down, I think I already knew it wouldn't be. The cover creaked when I opened it, soft, almost like a sigh. And that's when it happened, that feeling, like the room shifted, like something unseen leaned in closer. The air pressed against me, thick, waiting. Even the light felt different, less warm, more watchful. My heart started beating louder, not fast, just heavy, like each beat carried weight. I flipped past the blank page, and there it was, her handwriting. I knew it instantly. The same neat, careful strokes she used on birthday cards, on little notes she'd leave by the kettle. Familiar, comforting, but not here. Not like this. The ink had faded slightly, but the words were still sharp, clear, unmistakable. And for a moment, I just stared. Didn't read, couldn't, because something inside me, something quiet but certain, knew that once I did, nothing would feel the same again. I remember my fingers tightening on the page, just slightly,
enough to crease it, enough to feel real. Then I let my eyes drop. Just one line. That's all it took. And in that instant, sitting in that silent attic, dust hanging in the air, her voice suddenly gone from the world, everything I thought I knew about her began to unravel. My thumb rested on the edge of the page and wouldn't move. It sounds small, I know, just paper, just ink, but in that moment it felt heavier than anything I'd ever held, like the whole room was leaning in, waiting to see what I'd do next. I could have closed it. That was the easy way. Shut the cover, slide it back under that quilt, let the dust settle like nothing ever happened. Walk downstairs, make some tea, pretend the world was still exactly the way I'd left it. Part of me wanted that, badly, because once you know something, you can't unknow it. My fingers tightened slightly, the paper bending under the pressure. I remember staring at her handwriting without actually reading it, just looking at the curves of the letters, the careful way she looped her Ys, the careful spacing like she always took her time, even with words. It felt like looking at her, but not really seeing her. A strange kind of fear crept in then, not loud, not sharp, quiet, slow, the kind that settles in your chest and makes your breathing shallow. What if I didn't like what I found? That thought hit me harder than I expected. Because she wasn't just someone I loved, she was someone I believed in, completely. The kind of person you build your understanding of the world around. Goodness, patience, love. She wasn't just part of those things, she was proof they existed. And now, here I was, holding something she never meant for anyone to see. It felt like a betrayal. I actually whispered it out loud. I shouldn't. The words sounded strange in that attic, too loud. They echoed back at me, thin and uncertain. But then another thought slipped in, quieter, more dangerous. Why would she keep it? Not throw it away, not burn it, not hide it deeper, just place it there, where it could be found. That question lingered. I shifted slightly, the floor creaking under me, and for a second I thought I heard something else, a soft movement, a breath that wasn't mine. My head snapped up, eyes scanning the corners of the attic. Nothing, just shadows, just silence. Still, it felt like I wasn't alone anymore, like she was there in some way I couldn't explain, not watching, but present, waiting. I swallowed hard, my throat dry, and looked back down at the page. My heart had picked up now, each beat louder, heavier, not fast, just insistent, like it was trying to tell me something, or warn me. I thought about all those moments in her kitchen, the way she'd pause sometimes, like she was holding back words, the way her eyes drifted just past you, like she was seeing something else layered over the present. Maybe this was that something. My hand trembled slightly, just enough to make the paper whisper against my skin, a soft, fragile sound, like it might tear if I weren't careful. "You don't rush a life," she used to say. The memory hit me then, clear as anything, and suddenly this didn't feel rushed. It felt inevitable, like this moment had been waiting, sitting quietly in that attic, through seasons and years and silence, just for me to find it, just for me to sit here, caught between who I thought she was and who she might have really been. I took a slow breath. It tasted like dust and something older, something buried. My hesitation didn't disappear. It just shifted from fear to something else, something heavier. I lowered my eyes again, and this time I let myself read. I never told them the truth about that night. That was the first line that landed. Not loud, not dramatic, just steady, like she'd been holding it in so long it came out tired instead of heavy. But it hit me hard, because I knew exactly which night she meant. Everyone in our family did. It was one of those stories that got passed around at gatherings, softened over time, polished into something almost gentle. The night my grandfather almost died, the accident, the rain, the way she stayed calm, drove him to the hospital herself, saved his life. That's how it was always told. That's how I remembered it. Her voice years ago, quiet but strong. Sometimes you don't have time to be afraid, you just act. I believed that version. We all did. But this didn't sound like that story. My eyes moved to the next line before I could stop them.
I swallowed, throat tight, and kept going. He said he needed to see me, said it would only take a minute. A minute? It's always something small, isn't it? A minute, a quick stop, just this once. My heartbeat picked up, not fast, but deep, each thump echoing in my ears like it didn't belong to me anymore. The next line was messier, ink pressed harder into the page, like her hand had lost its calm. I should have told him the truth sooner. Him, not my grandfather, someone else. I felt it then, that sharp crack inside your chest when something familiar breaks into pieces you don't recognize. My grip loosened for a second, then tightened again like I needed to hold the story together before it fell apart completely. I could almost hear her voice, but it wasn't the one I knew. It was younger, strained, urgent. We argued, right there by the road. The rain was so loud I could barely hear him, but I knew what he was saying. I stopped breathing for a second. Rain. The accident had happened in the rain. That detail had always been part of the story, but it was background, weather, nothing more. Now it felt like something else entirely, something that covered things, hid them. My eyes scanned the page faster now, like I was afraid it might disappear if I slowed down. He stepped into the road before I could stop him. The words blurred for a second, not because I couldn't read them, but because my mind refused to place them where they belonged. Stepped into the road. Not an accident, not something sudden, something chosen, or at least something she believed she could have prevented. I saw the headlights too late. My chest tightened, breath catching halfway, like it didn't know whether to come or go. The attic felt smaller again, the walls pressing in, the silence louder than any sound. This wasn't the story we were told. This wasn't the version she gave us sitting at that kitchen table with her calm hands and steady voice. This was something else, something raw, unfinished. I let them believe it was just bad luck. That line, that one didn't just sit on the page, it settled in me, heavy, permanent, because suddenly that night, the one we all thought we understood wasn't a memory anymore. It was a secret. No, that's not right. I said it out loud. Quiet but firm, like if I gave the words shape, they might push everything back into place. My voice sounded strange in that attic, thin, uncertain, like it didn't belong to me anymore. I shook my head once, then again, harder this time. It didn't make sense. Not her. I stared at the page, willing the ink to rearrange itself into something familiar, something harmless, a misunderstanding, a detail taken the wrong way, anything that would let me breathe normally again. Because the woman I knew, she didn't hide things like that. She didn't let people believe something that wasn't true, not something this big, not something that changed everything. She wouldn't do that, I whispered. The words hung there, fragile. Wouldn't she? My grip tightened around the diary, fingers pressing into the warm leather like I could anchor myself to something solid. My mind started racing, flipping through memories like pages I'd read 100 times. Her laugh, soft, warm. Her voice, steady, certain. The way she looked at my grandfather's photograph, not with guilt, but with something gentler, something like devotion. That had to mean something. People like her don't live lies, not whole ones, not for years, right? I swallowed, but my throat stayed dry, like the air itself had turned to dust. Maybe I read it wrong. Yeah, that had to be it. I leaned forward again, eyes narrowing, scanning the lines more carefully this time, slower, searching for anything I might have missed, a word out of place, a meaning that could twist this back into something safe. But the words didn't change. They sat there, quiet and certain, like they didn't need defending. I felt a flicker of irritation then, sharp, quick. Why would she write it like this? Why leave it open to be found if it wasn't the full story? That's not fair, I muttered, almost accusing. It felt like she handed me something broken without telling me how to fix it. My chest tightened again, but this time it wasn't just fear, it was resistance, a push from deep inside, refusing to let go of the version of her I'd carried all my life. Because if this was true, then what else wasn't? Every story, every memory, every quiet moment where I thought I understood her, all of it suddenly felt uncertain. I hated that feeling. I pressed my palm against my chest, like I could steady whatever was unraveling inside me. My heartbeat was uneven now, skipping, catching, like it couldn't find its rhythm. "No," I said again, softer this time. I thought about that night, the one we all talked about, the way she told it, simple, controlled, almost gentle, no panic, no chaos, just action. That wasn't a lie. That couldn't be a lie. Maybe this was something else, something emotional, something written in a moment of guilt or confusion. People write things they don't mean all the time, especially when they're hurting. That had to be it. She was remembering it wrong, or blaming herself for something that wasn't really her fault. Yeah, that felt better. Not true, but better. I clung to that thought, holding it tight, even as something deeper inside me shifted uncomfortably. Because there was a part of me, small, quiet, but stubborn, that kept whispering, she never spoke without meaning it, not once. I closed my eyes for a second, trying to shut it all out, the attic, the diary, the weight of those words pressing in from every side. But even in the dark, I could still see them, clear, unchanging, and when I opened my eyes again, they were still there, waiting. I didn't notice the light fading at first. One minute, the attic was lined with soft gold, dust drifting through it like slow-moving ghosts, and the next it wasn't. The shadows stretched longer, thicker, swallowing the corners of the room until everything felt closer, tighter. But I didn't move. I just kept turning pages, one after another. The paper whispered each time my fingers slid across it, dry, fragile, like it had been waiting too long to be touched again. My legs had gone numb beneath me, but I barely felt it. All I could feel was that pull, that need to know. Her words changed as the entries went on. At first, they were careful, measured, like she was testing how much truth she could allow herself to write. But then they deepened, became heavier, messier, more honest. I see his face every time it rains. That line stopped me. I could almost hear it in her voice, not the calm one she used with us, but something softer, cracked at the edges, the kind of voice you only hear when someone thinks they're alone. I stopped breathing for a second. Rain. The accident had happened in the rain. That detail had always been part of the story, but it was background, weather, nothing more. Now it felt like something else entirely, something that covered things, hid them. My eyes scanned the page faster now, like I was afraid it might disappear if I slowed down. He stepped into the road before I could stop him. The words blurred for a second, not because I couldn't read them, but because my mind refused to place them where they belonged. Stepped into the road, not an accident, not something sudden, something chosen, or at least something she believed she could have prevented. I saw the headlights too late. My chest tightened, breath catching halfway, like it didn't know whether to come or go. The attic felt smaller again, the walls pressing in, the silence louder than any sound. This wasn't the story we were told. This wasn't the version she gave us, sitting at that kitchen table with her calm hands and steady voice. This was something else, something raw, unfinished. I let them believe it was just bad luck. That line, that one didn't just sit on the page, it settled in me, heavy, permanent, because suddenly that night, the one we all thought we understood wasn't a memory anymore. It was a secret. No, that's not right. I said it out loud. Quiet but firm, like if I gave the words shape, they might push everything back into place. My voice sounded strange in that attic, thin, uncertain, like it didn't belong to me anymore. I shook.
The attic had gone dark now. Almost fully. The last of the light clung weakly to the window, a dull gray fading into nothing. I should have turned on a lamp. I knew that. But I didn't want to break the moment. Didn't want to give myself a chance to stop. Another entry. I thought if I kept it buried, it would stay there. I let out a quiet breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. Buried. That word felt too real in that house. In that moment. Because that's exactly what this was, wasn't it? Something she had buried deep, hoping time would do the rest. Hoping silence would keep it still. But silence doesn't erase things. It just waits. The pages grew more uneven. Some lines darker, pressed harder into the paper. Others faint, like her hand had grown tired halfway through the thought. I loved him. I did. But not the way I was supposed to. My heart skipped. I leaned back slightly, the wood beneath me creaking in protest, but I barely heard it. My focus locked onto those words, replaying them over and over like they might change if I listened enough times. Not the way I was supposed to. I thought about my grandfather again. His quiet presence. The way he'd sit in his chair, watching her move around the kitchen like it was a dance he'd memorized. Had he known? That question lingered, heavy and unanswered. The darkness wrapped tighter around me now, pressing in from every side. The attic felt smaller, almost suffocating, like the walls were closing in with every truth I uncovered. Still. I couldn't stop. Another page. I hear his voice sometimes. Not clearly. Just enough to remember. A chill ran through me, sharp and sudden. The air felt colder now. Thicker. And for a brief, unsettling moment, I thought I heard something too. A faint shift. A breath that didn't belong to me. I froze. Listened. Nothing. Just the quiet hum of night settling in. Still, my skin prickled. I looked down again, forcing myself to focus, to stay grounded in the words. Because that's what this was about now. Not fear. Not comfort. Truth. Raw. Unfiltered. Unforgiving. And the deeper I went, the less I recognized the woman I thought I knew. I didn't expect to see our names in it. That's what stopped me cold. Up until then, it felt distant. Like I was reading about a version of her that existed before us, before the family I knew took shape. Something sealed off in another time. But then I saw it. Written clear. Careful. Undeniable. I tried to keep it from touching the children. My stomach dropped. The word children sat there heavier than anything else on the page. Because that meant this wasn't just about her. Or him. Or some long-buried past. This had been close. Close enough to reach us. I leaned forward, breath catching slightly, eyes moving faster now. The paper brushed against my fingertips, dry and delicate, like it might crumble if I pressed too hard. They noticed more than I thought. A chill spread through me, slow and creeping. Noticed what? My mind started reaching backward, pulling up memories I hadn't touched in years. Small things. Forgettable things. Or at least, that's what I'd always believed. Until now. I remembered the quiet arguments. Not loud. Never loud. That wasn't her way. But sharp. Low voices behind half-closed doors. The kind that slipped through the cracks just enough for you to feel something was wrong, even if you couldn't hear the words. I used to pause in the hallway, holding my breath, trying to make sense of it. Then it would stop. Just like that. And when they came back out, everything looked normal again. Too normal. I turned the page, my hands no longer steady. He asked me once, late at night, when he thought I was asleep. My chest tightened. Asked her what? The words came slower now, like they carried weight she hadn't been able to lift easily. If there was someone else. The attic felt colder. I could almost see it. My grandfather sitting in the dark, voice low, careful. Not angry. Not accusing. Just searching. And her, lying still, pretending sleep. I didn't answer. My breath hitched. Not denial. Not truth. Just silence. That kind of silence, it says more than words ever could. I rubbed my hands together unconsciously, trying to shake off the cold settling into my fingers. But it wasn't the air. It was the picture forming in my mind. All those years, that quiet, steady marriage I thought I understood. It hadn't been as simple as it looked. I read on. He never asked again. Something about that line, it hurt more than the rest. Because I knew that kind of silence too. The kind that comes after you stop expecting answers. After you decide, consciously or not, to live with what you don't know. My eyes burned slightly, but I didn't blink. I couldn't. Another entry, shorter this time. More controlled. I saw it in the way he looked at me after that. I remembered that look. Not clearly. Not in a way I could have explained back then. But now, it started to make sense. There were moments, brief, flickering ones, when he'd watch her from across the room. Not with anger. Not even sadness, exactly. Just distance. Like something invisible stood between them, something neither of them named. And I never questioned it. Kids don't. They accept what they see. They build their understanding around it, never thinking to look underneath. But she had seen it. She had felt it. And she had written it down. I told myself it would pass. That time would smooth it over. I let out a slow breath, my chest tight, heavy. Time doesn't smooth everything. Some things just settle deeper. I turned another page, the paper trembling slightly in my hands now. And for the first time since I started reading, I wasn't just uncovering her past. I was starting to see my own memories differently. I wish I hadn't seen the name. Everything before that, it was heavy, yes. Unsettling. But still distant in a way I could manage. Like watching a storm from behind glass. But then it changed. Just one word. A name I knew too well. Daniel. My breath caught so sharply it hurt. I stared at it, frozen, like if I didn't move, it might disappear. Like the ink might fade back into the paper and take the weight with it. But it didn't. It stayed there. Clear. Familiar. Too familiar. Daniel wasn't just anyone. He was the one who laughed the loudest at family dinners. The one who showed up early, stayed late, helped fix things without being asked. My uncle. My grandfather's son. The one everyone said had his father's patience, his steady heart. The good one. And now his name was sitting here, in her diary. Not in love. Not in memory. Something else. My fingers tightened around the page, the edges pressing into my skin. I could feel my pulse in my fingertips, uneven, restless. No, I whispered, shaking my head slowly. This didn't fit. It couldn't. I forced my eyes to move forward, dragging them across the next line like it physically resisted me. He was the first to notice. A cold weight dropped into my stomach. Notice what? The question didn't even have time to settle before the next line answered it. He looked at me differently after that day. I swallowed hard, my throat dry and tight. That day. The same day. It was all connected. Every piece, every silence, every glance I thought I understood. But now, it was shifting. Becoming something else. I could see him in my mind, clear as anything. Standing in that old living room, hands in his pockets, leaning slightly to one side like he always did. Watching. Quiet. Thoughtful. Had he known? The thought twisted inside me, sharp and uncomfortable. I read on, slower now. Careful. Like the words might cut deeper if I rushed. I saw it in his eyes. Questions he didn't ask. That line hit differently. Because I knew that look. I had seen it before, just not like this. There were moments, growing up, when he'd look at her a little longer than usual. Not strange enough to question. Just enough to feel. A pause in conversation. A slight tilt of his head. Like he was searching for something just beneath the surface. I never understood it. Now, it felt like I was standing in the middle of something I had walked through my entire life without seeing. My chest tightened, a slow pressure building behind my ribs. Another line. He stopped calling me Mom for a while. I froze. That wasn't possible. I would have remembered that. Wouldn't I? My mind scrambled, digging through old memories like scattered pieces, trying to find something, anything, that matched what I was reading. And then, faintly. A shift. Not in words. Not something obvious. But a tone. There had been a time when his voice sounded different around her. Less warm. More careful. Like every word was measured before it left his mouth. I thought it was stress. Work. Life. Something normal. But now it felt like something else entirely. Something deeper. I don't think he hates me, she wrote. But he doesn't trust me anymore. That line settled heavy. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just, final. I leaned back slightly, the wood beneath me groaning, but I barely heard it. My focus stayed locked on the page, on that name, on everything it now carried. Because this wasn't just her secret anymore. It had touched him. Changed him. Maybe even changed all of us in ways we never noticed. And the worst part? I had no idea how far it went. My hands wouldn't stay still. I tried to steady them, pressed my palms against the diary, flattened it against my knees, but the tremor kept coming back, small at first, then deeper, like something inside me was shaking loose. This isn't right, I whispered. But the words didn't land. They just fell between me and the page, thin and useless. Because everything I was reading, it felt real. Too real. The kind of real you can't push away no matter how hard you try. My chest tightened, a slow pressure building like a storm that hadn't broken yet. I could feel my heartbeat climbing, not fast, just heavy, each beat landing harder than the last, like it was trying to get my attention. Or warn me. I looked around the attic, desperate for something familiar, something steady. The old trunk. The slanted ceiling. The faint outline of the window now swallowed by night. Everything looked the same. But it didn't feel the same. It felt smaller. Like the walls had shifted closer without me noticing. I pulled in a breath, but it caught halfway. The air felt thick, like it didn't want to go in, like it didn't belong in my lungs anymore. Stop, I muttered to myself. Just stop reading. That was the answer, wasn't it? Close the diary. Put it back. Walk away before it goes any further. Before it changes anything else. But my fingers, they didn't listen. They stayed curled around the edge of the page, holding on like letting go would make everything worse. And maybe it would. Because now the thoughts had started. Loud. Fast. Colliding into each other. What else did she lie about? Did anyone else know? Was this why things sometimes felt off? I shook my head, sharp, trying to break the spiral, but it didn't help. The questions kept coming, layering over each other until I couldn't separate them anymore. And underneath it all, a sudden sound broke through the silence, a faint creak somewhere behind me. I froze. Every muscle locked. Slowly, I turned my head, eyes scanning the dark corners of the attic. My heart was louder now, pounding in my ears, drowning out everything else. Nothing. Just shadows. Still, it felt like something had shifted. Like I wasn't alone with this anymore. I turned back quickly, pulling my focus down to the diary again, like it was the only solid thing left. But even that didn't feel safe. Not anymore. Because the more I read, the less I understood. And the less I understood, the more everything I thought I knew about her started to fall apart. I knew it wasn't just a diary anymore. That realization didn't come all at once. It crept in. Quiet. Slow. Like cold seeping through the floorboards into your bones. One line at a time, one truth leaning into the next until the weight of it became undeniable. This wasn't memories. This was a confession. My fingers hovered over the page, not turning it yet, just resting there like I was afraid of what waited on the other side. The paper felt thinner now. Fragile. Like it had been carrying too much for too long. She can never know. I read that line twice. Then a third time. The words didn't change. But something inside me did. She. Who was she talking about? My chest tightened again, but this time it wasn't just confusion. It was recognition. That sharp, sinking feeling when you realize the story you're in is bigger than you thought. I leaned closer, the diary almost touching my face now, like I needed to close the distance between me and whatever truth she'd buried in here. I promised him I would take it to my grave. A promise. Not a mistake. Not a moment of weakness. A decision. My heartbeat slowed for a second, just one heavy pause, before picking up again, louder, deeper, like it was trying to keep pace with something unraveling inside me. Grave. The word echoed. And suddenly, I wasn't just sitting in the attic anymore. I was standing at her funeral again. The quiet weight of it. The smell of damp earth. The way the sky hung low that day, like it knew something we didn't. She kept it. She really kept it. All the way to the end. My throat tightened, and I swallowed hard, but it didn't help. The dryness stayed, like I'd forgotten how to breathe properly. I turned the page. Slow. Careful. Like it might bite. I see him in Daniel sometimes. That name again. This time it didn't just surprise me. It settled deeper. Connected. Like pieces I didn't want to fit were starting to slide into place on their own. My fingers curled into the edge of the paper, pressing harder than before. The page bent slightly, but I didn't notice until later. Him. Daniel. The same thread running through everything. And suddenly, it didn't feel like coincidence anymore. It felt intentional. Planned. Or hidden. My stomach turned a slow, uneasy twist that didn't settle. Because now the questions weren't scattered anymore. They were pointing somewhere. Something specific. Something real. I wonder if he suspects. That line didn't just sit on the page. It stared back at me. Because if he suspected, then this wasn't just her secret. It was something shared. Something lived around. Something that had been breathing quietly inside our family while we sat at dinner tables, told stories, laughed like everything was simple. Like everything was known. A faint breeze slipped through the attic window, brushing against the back of my neck. Cold. Sudden. I flinched. Not from the air. From the feeling that I had just crossed into something I couldn't step back from. This diary, it wasn't just holding her past. It was holding something that reached forward. Into us. Into everything. And the deeper I read, the clearer it became. This wasn't about what happened back then. This was about what had been kept hidden. All along. The memory hit me before I was ready for it. Not gentle. Not gradual. It came sharp, like a door thrown open inside my head. Christmas. I was back there in an instant. The house alive with noise, laughter spilling into every corner, the smell of roasted meat and sweet cinnamon wrapping around everything like a warm blanket. Lights blinking softly against the windows, reflecting off glass ornaments that chimed faintly whenever someone brushed past the tree. I could hear it all. Forks clinking against plates. My aunt laughing too loudly at something that wasn't that funny. Someone calling out from the kitchen, asking where the extra napkins were. And her. Moving through it all like she always did. Calm. Steady. Smiling. But now, something felt off. Even inside the memory. I could see her standing by the table, pouring tea into small cups, her hands precise, careful as ever. She looked the same. Exactly the same. But the feeling around her, it had shifted. Like I was seeing her through a different light. Daniel was there too. Leaning against the wall, arms crossed, watching. Quiet. More than usual. I remember noticing it back then, just briefly. Thinking maybe he was tired. Maybe something was on his mind. But now, that look on his face, it wasn't just quiet. It was searching. He wasn't watching the room. He was watching her. I felt it then, standing inside that memory like I was both there and not. A strange distance. Like I was seeing something I had missed the first time around. She glanced up at him once. Just once. And it was quick. So quick I almost lost it. But there it was. That flicker. Not fear exactly. Not guilt you could name. Just awareness. Like two people sharing a moment no one else could see. My chest tightened. I watched it unfold again, slower this time. Every movement stretching out, every glance carrying more weight than it should. Someone said something funny. The room laughed. She smiled. But her eyes, they didn't stay in the moment. They drifted. Just for a second. Toward him. And he didn't smile back. He just held her gaze. Steady. Unblinking. Like he was waiting. For what, I didn't know. Back then, I would have missed it completely. Probably did. Because nothing happened. No argument. No raised voices. No obvious crack in the surface. Just a moment. Small. Quiet. Gone before it could be questioned. But now, sitting in that attic, with her words still echoing in my head. That moment didn't feel small anymore. It felt loaded. heavy with everything unsaid. I remembered how the night ended. The dishes stacked in the sink. The lights dimmed low. People saying their goodbyes at the door, coats pulled tight against the cold. Daniel left early. I hadn't thought much of it at the time. Just a quick hug, a short goodbye, no explanation. But now, I remembered the way he looked at her before he stepped out. Not angry. Not soft either. Something in between. Something unfinished. And she didn't follow him to the door. Didn't call out. Just stood there, hands resting lightly against the table, watching from a distance. Still. Silent. Like she was holding herself in place. The memory faded slowly, like the last note of a song you can't quite let go of. But the feeling stayed. Stronger now. Clearer. Because what once felt like nothing now felt like everything. I shouldn't have turned that page. Even now. I can feel the moment my fingers pushed it over, slow, reluctant, like some part of me already knew what waited there wouldn't let me go back. The paper made that same soft sound, dry, fragile. But this time, it felt louder. Final. My eyes landed halfway down the page. Not at the beginning. Right in the middle of it. I saw him the day Daniel was born. Everything inside me stopped. Not slowed. Stopped. My breath caught so hard it hurt, like I'd swallowed something sharp. The attic seemed to tilt, just slightly, enough to make me feel unsteady where I sat. No. No, that didn't. I blinked, hard, forcing my eyes to focus again. The words didn't move. They didn't soften. They just stayed there, waiting. I told everyone I needed air. That the hospital room was too warm. My chest tightened, pulling inward like something was being dragged out of me. Hospital. Daniel. Born. And she left? I could feel my pulse in my throat now, loud and uneven, like it didn't belong to me anymore. I kept reading. I couldn't stop. He was standing outside, across the street. I knew it was him before he even stepped into the light. A cold wave washed through me. Him. That same word. The same presence that had been threading through every page. My hands started to shake again, worse this time. The diary trembled against my knees, the edges pressing into my skin like it was trying to hold me in place. He didn't say much. He never did when it mattered most. The sentence felt intimate. Too intimate. Like something shared between two people who had never really let each other go. I swallowed, but my throat refused to ease. What was she doing out there? On that day? Of all days? I asked him why he came. My heartbeat stumbled. A pause. Then. He said he needed to see what we had done. The words didn't just hit. They sank. Deep. Heavy. What we had done. My mind tried to push it away, tried to twist it into something else, something safer, something that made sense. But it wouldn't bend. It wouldn't change. It stayed exactly as it was. And suddenly, the space between those words filled itself. Not with certainty. But with something worse. Possibility. My fingers tightened so hard the page crumpled slightly under them. No, I whispered, barely a sound. Because now my thoughts were moving faster than I could control them. Daniel. That day. Him. The timing. The way she wrote it, like it all belonged together. Like it always had. I couldn't look at him for long. Her words again. Soft. But breaking underneath. Not with the baby crying behind me. My chest collapsed inward. That image, so clear, so vivid, it hit something deep and raw inside me. A newborn crying. A woman standing between two worlds. One inside that hospital room. One waiting outside. And her, caught in the middle. I told myself it didn't matter anymore. That it was over. The sentence felt like a lie even as I read it. Like she had known it wasn't true the moment she wrote it down. My breathing came shallow now, uneven, like the air itself had turned too thin. I didn't want to read the next line. But I did. I prayed Daniel would never carry it. That was it. That was the moment everything broke. Not loudly. Not all at once. But deep. Quiet. Permanent. Because whatever it wasn't just hers anymore. I couldn't trust my own memories anymore. That was the worst part. Not the words on the page. Not the secrets themselves. It was what they did to everything I thought I already knew. I sat there, the diary open in my lap, but I wasn't reading anymore. I was somewhere else, back in every room I'd ever shared with her, every moment I thought was simple, clean, untouched. Now nothing felt untouched. Nothing felt safe. I closed my eyes, just for a second. And the memories came anyway. Her kitchen. Late afternoon light spilling across the table, warm and soft. I'm sitting there, younger, talking about something small, school, friends, something that mattered only because I was still learning what mattered. She's listening. Of course she is. Always listening. But now. I see it differently. The way her smile would hold for just a second too long. The way her fingers would pause against her cup before she lifted it. The way her eyes, just barely, drifted past me sometimes. Not distracted. Distant. Like part of her was somewhere else entirely. I used to think that was wisdom. Now. I wonder if it was something she couldn't escape. I opened my eyes again, the attic pressing in around me, the air heavier than before. Another memory surfaced, uninvited. A summer afternoon. Hot. Still. The kind where the world feels slow and stretched out. Daniel is there, standing by the back door, talking to her in low voices. I remember the sound more than the words, tight, controlled, like both of them were choosing each sentence carefully. I didn't understand it then. I didn't even try. Adults had their own conversations. Their own concerns. But now. I remember the way he looked at her. Not like a son. Not fully. There was something else there. Something complicated. Something I didn't have the language for back then. And her, she didn't meet his eyes for long. Just brief glances. Quick. Measured. Like looking too long might reveal something they both were trying to keep hidden. My chest tightened again, sharper this time. Because these weren't new memories. They were the same ones I'd always had. Just changed. Shifted. Like someone had turned the light slightly and suddenly all the shadows looked different. I rubbed my hands over my face, trying to ground myself, but it didn't help. The feeling stayed. That slow, sinking realization that I had been living inside a version of the truth. Not a lie. But not the whole thing either. And that's worse, in a way. Because partial truth feels real. It feels solid. Until it cracks. Another image rose up. Her hugging me.
Goodbye.
Tight. Longer than usual. Her hand resting at the back of my head, holding me there just a second more than necessary. Take care of yourself, she'd say. Soft. Gentle. But now. I hear something else underneath it. A weight. A knowing. Like she was saying more than the words could carry. Like she was trying to give me something without explaining why. I pulled the diary closer, my fingers curling into its edges again. Because suddenly, it wasn't just her I was trying to understand. It was everything. Every silence. Every look. Every moment that didn't quite make sense but never demanded to be questioned. Until now. And the deeper I let myself think about it, the clearer it became. I hadn't been blind. I had just never been shown where to look. It was never said outright. That's what makes it worse. If it had been written plain, clear, undeniable, I could have faced it head-on. Accepted it. Fought it, maybe. But this was different. It lived between the lines. I started noticing the silences more than the words. That's what she wrote. And the moment I read it, something inside me shifted again. Because I knew those silences. I had lived inside them without ever naming them. My fingers traced the edge of the page, slow, absent, like I was trying to feel something hidden beneath the surface of the paper. The attic was quiet, too quiet now. The kind of quiet that hums in your ears, makes every small movement sound louder than it should. I leaned closer. Her handwriting had changed again. Tighter. More controlled. Like she was choosing each word carefully, aware that even writing it down was dangerous. He stopped sitting beside me at dinner. Simple. Almost nothing. But I could see it. Clear as day. The long wooden table. Plates passed from one hand to another. The low murmur of conversation filling the space. And him, my grandfather, taking the chair just a little further down, not making a scene, not drawing attention. Just distance. I never questioned it. Chairs change. People shift. Life moves. That's what I told myself back then. Now, it felt deliberate. A quiet decision made without words. My chest tightened, the feeling creeping in again, that slow, uneasy pull like something important was just out of reach. Another line. He became kinder after. That one hit differently. Kinder. Not colder. Not angry. Kinder. I frowned slightly, confusion threading through the fear. Why kinder? I read it again. And then it settled. Because kindness like that, it isn't always softness. Sometimes it's acceptance. Sometimes it's what comes after you stop asking questions you don't want answers to. My throat went dry. I could almost see him now, moving through the house with that same calm presence, helping where he could, speaking gently, never raising his voice. But maybe, just maybe, that wasn't peace. Maybe it was something else entirely. Something quieter. Something heavier. I don't think he forgave me. I think he chose not to know. The words sat there, still and heavy. And something inside me broke just a little more. Because that kind of choice, it doesn't happen all at once. It builds. From moments. Glances. Silences that stretch just a little too long. I turned the page, slower this time. Careful. Almost afraid of what pattern might reveal itself next. I began to understand what betrayal looks like when it's not spoken. My breath caught. Betrayal. There it was. Not loud. Not explosive. Quiet. Buried. Lived with. I felt a chill run through me, sharp and sudden, like someone had opened a window I hadn't seen before. The air shifted again, colder now, pressing against my skin. Because suddenly, all those small things I had dismissed. They weren't small. They were pieces. And I had been standing in the middle of them my whole life, never realizing what they formed when you put them together. A life built around something unspoken. A truth everyone felt. But no one named. I should have stopped hours ago. My eyes burned. My back ached. My legs had gone completely numb beneath me, pins and needles crawling up from the floorboards like they were trying to pull me down into it. But still. I didn't move. I couldn't. The attic was swallowed in darkness now. Not the soft kind. The heavy kind. Thick. Pressing. The only light came from a weak bulb hanging above, flickering every now and then like it was tired of staying on. Just like me. But every time my eyes tried to close, the words pulled me back. One more page. Just one more. That's what I kept telling myself. The paper felt rougher now, like time had worn it thin in places. Each turn came slower, more deliberate. Not because I wanted to be careful, but because I didn't have the strength to move faster anymore. I thought the nights would get easier. I let out a breath that felt older than it should have been. Nights.
Yeah.
I understood that now. Because this one, it didn't feel like it was moving forward. It just stretched. Endless. The kind of night where time doesn't pass, it lingers. I rubbed my eyes, hard, trying to clear the blur, but the moment I opened them again, the words were still there. Waiting. I hear the house breathe when everyone is asleep. A chill slid down my spine. I froze for a second, listening. Really listening. And for the first time, I heard it too. Not breathing, not exactly. But the soft creak of wood settling. The faint shift of something in the walls. The kind of sounds you ignore when you feel safe, but notice when you don't. My heart started beating faster. Not loud. But uneven. Like it wasn't sure what was coming next. I looked around again, slower this time. The corners of the attic seemed darker than before, deeper somehow. The shapes of old boxes and furniture blurred together, unfamiliar in a way they hadn't been earlier. For a moment, I thought about getting up. Just standing. Stretching. Walking away. But the thought didn't hold. Because the diary was still in my hands. And it felt alive. Not warm. Not comforting. Just present. Like it needed to be finished. I keep thinking I hear footsteps that never reach the door. That line settled into me, quiet and cold. I held my breath without meaning to. Listened again. Nothing. Just silence. But it didn't feel empty. It felt full. My fingers tightened around the edge of the page, nails pressing lightly into the paper. Why didn't I stop? That question floated through my mind, slow and tired. Why didn't I just close it, walk away, let whatever this was stay buried? But deep down, I already knew the answer. Because I couldn't go back. Not really. Not after everything I'd read. Sleep wouldn't come, even if I tried. Not with these words sitting inside me, heavy and unfinished. I don't deserve rest, she wrote. I swallowed hard. That line, it didn't just belong to her anymore. It settled into me too. Because now, this wasn't just her night. It was mine. And the deeper I went, the less it felt like reading. And the more it felt like being pulled into something I couldn't step out of. The page was different. I felt it before I even read a word. Thicker. Slightly warped, like it had absorbed something over time, humidity, maybe, or something else. My fingers paused against it, tracing the edge slowly, as if the paper itself might warn me not to go further. But it didn't. So I turned it. And the moment my eyes landed on the first line, everything inside me went still. I told him the truth that night. No build-up. No softening. Just that. The words sat there, heavier than anything she had written before. My breath caught, held tight in my chest like it didn't know whether it was safe to move again. The truth. What truth? My hands tightened around the diary, knuckles pale, the leather pressing hard against my skin. I leaned closer, heart thudding now, louder than the silence around me. It was raining again. Just like before. The pattern. The same night. The same rain. Everything circling back to that moment. I could feel it, like something long buried was finally pushing its way up, breaking through the surface whether I was ready or not. He asked me if Daniel was his. The world didn't just tilt this time. It dropped. My stomach turned so sharply I had to press my hand against it, like I could hold something in place that had already shifted too far. No. No, that wasn't. But the words didn't give me time to argue. They didn't care what I wanted to believe. I couldn't lie anymore. My chest tightened, breath coming short and uneven now. The air felt thinner, harder to pull in, like the attic itself was closing around me. Couldn't lie anymore. Which meant she had been. All those years. All that silence. All those careful moments that never made sense. They were leading here. My vision blurred for a second, but I forced it back, blinking hard, refusing to lose even a single word. I told him yes. That was it. That was the line that changed everything. Not loud. Not dramatic. But final. Irreversible. I felt something inside me crack, not break completely, just split enough that nothing would ever fit together the same way again. Daniel. My mind struggled to hold on to the name the same way it had before. Uncle. Family. Familiar. Now it felt unstable. Like the ground beneath it had shifted. He didn't speak for a long time. I could see it. Clear as anything. My grandfather standing there, rain falling hard around him, soaking through everything, but he doesn't move. Doesn't react the way you'd expect. Just still. Processing something too big to fit into a single moment. I thought he would leave. My throat tightened painfully. Leave. Walk away. End it. That's what should have happened. That's what made sense. But the next line, it didn't follow that path. He said we would never speak of it again. I froze. Completely. Because that choice. That silence. It explained everything. Every distance. Every kindness that felt just a little too controlled. Every moment that never quite added up. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't understanding. It was a decision to carry it. Together. Without ever naming it again. I agreed. Her words. Simple. But heavy with everything they held inside. A lifetime of it. My hands trembled harder now, the diary shifting slightly in my grip. Because suddenly, it all made sense. And at the same time, nothing did anymore. I didn't recognize her anymore. That thought came out of nowhere, and once it settled, it wouldn't leave. I stared at the page, but I wasn't reading now. I was seeing her. Not the woman in the diary, the one behind the words, but the one I knew. The one who stood in that warm kitchen, hands steady, voice soft, eyes kind. And suddenly, those two versions didn't fit together. Not cleanly. Not the way I needed them to. Who were you? I whispered. The question slipped out before I could stop it, hanging there in the thick attic air like it expected an answer. But nothing came. Just that same quiet, pressing in from every side. I leaned back slightly, the wood beneath me creaking low and tired, and closed my eyes. Maybe if I pictured her the way I always had, it would fix something. Her smile. That gentle curve of her lips that made everything feel safe. Her voice. Slow, calm, never rushed, like she had already made peace with things the rest of us were still trying to understand. But now, something else slipped in. A second layer. Barely visible before. Now impossible to ignore. The pauses. The way her eyes would drift just a second too far. The way her hands, steady as they were, sometimes held on to things a little longer than necessary, like she was grounding herself. I opened my eyes again, breath shallow. Because what if that version of her wasn't complete? What if the woman I loved was only part of who she really was? The thought didn't feel like betrayal. It felt worse. It felt like loss. Like realizing something you thought was whole had always been divided. She chose silence, I murmured, my fingers brushing against the page again. But why? That question burned deeper now. Not just what she did, but who she had to become to live with it. Years. Decades. Sitting across from us, laughing, listening, loving, while carrying something that heavy underneath. How do you do that? How do you live two lives in one body without letting it break you? Or maybe it did break her. Just quietly. In ways no one noticed. I thought about the way she held me sometimes. Tight. Longer than most people do. Like she was trying to hold on to something, or maybe hold something back. Was that love? Or was it something mixed with regret? The line blurred now. Everything blurred. Because the more I tried to hold on to the image I had of her, the more it slipped. Changed. Reformed into something more complicated. More human. But also, more distant. I didn't know you, I said softly. And that hurt. More than anything I'd read. Because love, the kind I had for her, it was built on knowing. On trust. On the belief that who she showed me was who she was. But now I wasn't so sure. And that uncertainty, it didn't just change her. It changed me. The way I remembered her. The way I held on to her. The way I understood everything she ever said. Because suddenly, every word, every glance, every quiet moment felt like it might have meant something more. Something I was never meant to see. It all started connecting at once. Not slowly. Not gently. Like threads I didn't even know were there suddenly pulling tight, weaving themselves into something I couldn't ignore anymore. I looked down at the diary, then away, then back again, like my mind needed time to catch up with what my eyes already understood. This wasn't just her story. It was all of ours. I could see the table again. That same long table where we all sat, birthdays, holidays, quiet Sunday dinners. Everyone in their place. Everyone playing their part like it was natural, like it had always been that way. But now, I could see the spaces between us. My grandfather at one end. Calm. Controlled. A man who never raised his voice, never made a scene. The kind of presence that filled a room without trying. And her, moving around him, never too close, never too far. Like there was an invisible line neither of them crossed anymore. I never noticed that distance before. Or maybe I did, and just didn't understand what I was seeing. Daniel. He fit differently now too. Not just a son. Not just family. Something more complicated. I could picture him sitting slightly turned away from her, not fully facing, not fully distant. Like he was caught between two truths he couldn't reconcile. The way he spoke to her, respectful, always, but careful. Measured. Like every word had to pass through something before it reached her. That wasn't normal. But I called it normal. We all did. Because no one said anything. And that was the pattern, wasn't it? No one said anything. I built a life around what we didn't say, she had written earlier. Now I understood it. This whole family, it wasn't just built on love. It was built on silence. Layers of it. Carefully placed. Carefully maintained. I leaned back, my body heavy, the attic pressing down around me like it was holding all of it in place. And suddenly, other faces started shifting too. My aunt, always overly cheerful, filling gaps in conversation before they could stretch too long. My parents, who never asked certain questions, never dug too deep into things that didn't quite make sense. Even me. Sitting there all those years, feeling something off but never reaching for it. Because reaching would mean breaking something. And maybe we all knew that. Maybe we all chose not to. That thought settled into me slowly. Heavy. Uncomfortable. Because it meant this wasn't just her burden. It wasn't just my grandfather's silence. Or Daniel's distance. It was all of us. Connected in ways we didn't talk about. Bound by something that lived underneath everything else. Something fragile. Something dangerous. I looked down at the diary again, my fingers resting lightly on its edge. This wasn't just a collection of secrets. It was a map. A quiet, hidden map of how we all became who we are. And the more I followed it, the more I realized. Nothing in this family happened by accident. I almost missed it. Buried halfway down the page, written smaller than the rest, like she didn't want the words to take up too much space, like making them smaller might make them lighter. But they weren't. I went to him again. My breath caught, sharp and sudden. Again. That one word, it echoed. Not a mistake. Not a single moment lost to confusion or weakness. Again meant choice. Again meant it didn't end when it should have. My fingers tightened against the paper, the edge pressing into my skin, grounding me just enough to keep reading. It was years later. After everything had settled. After we learned how to live without speaking about it. My chest felt heavy now, like something was sitting on it, refusing to move. They had built a life on silence, and still, it hadn't been enough. I leaned closer, the diary almost brushing against my face, like I needed to be as near as possible to understand what she was saying. I told myself I was only going to see him once. To close it properly. A hollow sound escaped my throat, half breath, half disbelief. That's what people always tell themselves. Once. Just once. But the way she wrote it. I already knew. It hadn't been just once. My heart was beating harder now, uneven, pushing against my ribs like it was trying to break free. He looked older. Tired. But his eyes, they hadn't changed. The words softened there. Not lighter. Just, filled with something else. Something that didn't belong in a life she had already chosen. I remembered everything the moment I saw him. I swallowed hard, my throat tight, dry. Of course she did. Some things don't fade. They wait. Quiet. Patient. Until the moment you let them back in. I didn't mean to stay as long as I did. The line felt fragile. Like it might break if I held onto it too tightly. But I couldn't let go. Because now, it wasn't just the past anymore. It was something that reached forward. Something that lived alongside everything I thought I understood. I told him about Daniel. That line hit deeper than the rest. Not loud. But cutting. Because this wasn't just her secret anymore. She had shared it. Given it shape outside of herself. Made it real in someone else's world. My chest tightened sharply, breath catching halfway again. What did that even mean? What did he say? Did he know? Did he see it? I saw the way his hands trembled. Her words. Soft. But heavy with something that felt like regret, or maybe something worse. He asked me if I was happy. The question lingered. Simple. But impossible. I closed my eyes for a second, the weight of it pressing in from every side. Was she? All those years, sitting at that table, smiling, listening, holding everything together. Was she happy? I told him yes. I opened my eyes again, staring at the page. That answer, it didn't feel true. Not fully. Not completely. It felt like something chosen. Something practiced. Something you say when the truth is too complicated to explain. But I stayed longer than I should have. There it was. The confession. Not just in what she did, but in what she couldn't stop herself from doing. My hands trembled again, worse now, the diary shifting slightly in my grip. Because this changed everything again. It wasn't just one night. Not just one truth buried and left behind. It had followed her. Stayed with her. Moved through her life like something unfinished. Something she kept returning to. Even when she knew she shouldn't. And that realization. It didn't just hurt. It settled deep. Like something I wouldn't ever be able to unsee. I couldn't hold it together anymore. It didn't happen all at once. No loud crack. No single moment where everything shattered. It was quieter than that. My hands just gave out. The diary slipped slightly in my grip, landing heavier against my lap, the sound dull against the silence. My fingers curled inward like they didn't know what to do without something to hold on to. And then my chest tightened. Hard. Like something inside me had been pulled too far, and finally snapped back. I tried to breathe. I really did. But the air came in uneven, shallow, like my body had forgotten the rhythm. Each breath caught halfway, stuck somewhere between my throat and my lungs, refusing to settle. Stop, I whispered. Not to the diary. To myself. But the word didn't carry any weight. It just fell apart the moment it left my mouth. My vision blurred, not completely, just enough that the words on the page softened at the edges, like they were slipping away from me. I blinked hard, once, twice, but it didn't clear. It stayed. That heavy, fogged feeling. I pressed my palm against my chest, fingers splayed, like I could steady whatever was racing inside. My heart wasn't just beating now, it was pounding, uneven, loud enough to drown out everything else. Or maybe, everything else had gone quiet. The attic felt different. Too close. Too small. The walls didn't move, but it felt like they did. Like the space around me had tightened, leaving no room for anything but the weight of what I'd read. I shook my head, slow at first, then harder. No, no. The words came out broken. Because I didn't know what I was denying anymore. Her? The story? Myself? Everything blurred together until there was no clear line left to hold on to. I looked down at the diary again, but this time, I didn't see pages. I saw moments. Her face. Daniel's silence. My grandfather's quiet distance. All of it stacked on top of each other, pressing in from every direction. Too much. It was too much. A sound escaped me then, low, uneven. Not quite a sob. Not quite anything I could name. Just, something breaking its way out. I bent forward slightly, elbows resting on my knees, the diary shifting again, but I didn't care. My hands moved to my face, pressing hard, like I could block it all out. But it didn't stop. It kept coming. Every line. Every truth. Every piece I couldn't unlearn. And underneath it all, something deeper. Grief. Not for her being gone. But for the version of her I had lost. Because that version, it wasn't real anymore. Or maybe it never was. That thought hit harder than anything else. I let out a shaky breath, dragging it in again too quickly, like I was trying to outrun something that was already inside me. The attic creaked softly around me, the old wood shifting like it always had. But now, it sounded different. Louder. Closer. Like the house itself had been holding this all along, and was finally letting me feel it. I lowered my hand slowly, staring at the diary again. And for the first time since I opened it, I didn't want to read anymore. But I knew I wasn't done. I closed it. Not gently. Not carefully. Just closed it. The cover pressed shut with a soft, final sound that felt louder than it should have, like it echoed through the attic and settled somewhere deep inside me. My hands stayed on it for a moment, palms flat, fingers spread, as if I needed to keep it sealed. Like something inside might try to get out. My breathing was still uneven, catching in places it shouldn't. I pulled in a slow breath, held it, let it out, but it didn't calm anything. It just reminded me I was still there. Still sitting on that hard wooden floor. Still holding something I couldn't undo. The air felt stale. Thick. Like it had been waiting all night with me. I pushed the diary slightly away from my body, just a few inches, but it felt like distance. Like I needed space between me and whatever it carried. For the first time, I looked up. Really looked. The attic hadn't changed. Same slanted ceiling. Same old beams running across like tired bones. Same boxes stacked in quiet corners, holding pieces of a life I thought I understood. But now, it felt different. The shadows were heavier. Deeper. Like they knew something I didn't before. I swallowed, my throat still dry, and leaned back against one of the beams. The wood was cold against my shoulder, solid in a way I needed right then. Something real. Something that hadn't shifted. Because everything else had. My hands rested in my lap now, empty, but they didn't feel light. They felt hollow. Like they had been holding too much for too long and didn't know what to do without it. I closed my eyes. Not to sleep. Just to stop seeing. But it didn't work. The images were still there. Her handwriting. That line. Daniel. The rain. My grandfather standing still in a moment that changed everything. It all moved behind my eyelids like it had its own rhythm now, slow and unrelenting. I exhaled, long and shaky. Okay, I whispered. Not because anything was okay. But because I needed something to hold on to. Something simple. Something steady. The word felt fragile. But it stayed. For a second. Then it slipped. Because nothing felt steady anymore. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees, head dropping slightly as I stared at the floorboards beneath me. They were scratched, worn down from years of use. Familiar in a way that felt grounding. Normal. I needed normal. But even that didn't feel the same. Because now I knew what could exist beneath something that looked untouched. I reached out slowly, my fingers brushing the edge of the diary again. Just lightly. Like testing something I wasn't sure I wanted to feel. It was still there. Still solid. Still real. I pulled my hand back. Quick. Like I'd touched something hot. Another breath. Slower this time. Deeper. It still didn't fix anything. But it gave me a second. Just a second. And in that second, I realized something I hadn't before. This wasn't just about reading anymore. It was about carrying. What I knew now. What I couldn't unknow. The attic creaked softly above me, the old wood shifting like it always had. A quiet reminder that time kept moving, whether I was ready or not. I looked at the diary again. Closed. Silent. But not finished. And neither was I. Morning came anyway. I didn't feel it arrive. There was no sense of rest, no clean break between night and day. Just a slow shift in the light, gray at first, then pale gold creeping through the window like it had every other morning in that house. But it didn't feel like every other morning. It felt exposed. I was already downstairs when the kettle started to hum. I don't remember walking down. Don't remember putting the diary back where I found it. But my hands still felt like they'd been holding it, that faint pressure lingering in my palms. The kitchen smelled the same. Tea. Toast. Something warm and familiar. It should have helped. It didn't. I stood there, staring at the counter, watching the steam rise from the kettle in thin, twisting lines. My mind was quiet for a second, too quiet. Like everything had been pushed down just far enough to function. Footsteps behind me. Soft. Normal. Did you sleep okay? My mother's voice. Gentle. Casual. The kind of question that never meant anything deeper than it sounded. But now, it did. I turned, slow, forcing something onto my face. A smile, maybe. Something close enough.
Yeah,
I said. The word came out too quickly. Too easy. Like I hadn't just spent the entire night unraveling everything I thought I knew. She nodded, not looking too closely, already moving past me to reach for a cup. The ordinary rhythm of her movements felt strange now. Measured. Unaware. Or maybe, just practiced. I watched her pour the tea, the liquid hitting the cup in a soft, steady stream. No hesitation. No weight behind it. How was that possible? How could everything feel so normal, when it wasn't? Want some? She asked, glancing at me. I nodded again. Didn't trust my voice this time. I sat at the table, the chair scraping lightly against the floor, a sound that seemed louder than it should have. Everything felt louder now. Sharper. Even silence. She placed the cup in front of me, and I wrapped my hands around it automatically. The warmth seeped into my skin, grounding, but not enough to steady what was still shifting inside me. I took a sip. It tasted the same. Of course it did. But something about it felt different anyway. Like I was tasting it through a version of myself that hadn't existed yesterday. Big plans today? She asked, sitting across from me. I shook my head slightly. No, just taking it easy. Another lie. Small. Simple. But it sat heavy in my chest. Because suddenly, I understood how easy it was. To say something normal. To act like everything was fine. Even when it wasn't. Especially when it wasn't. My eyes drifted, just for a second, toward the hallway. Toward the stairs. Toward the attic. And I felt it again, that pull. That weight waiting just out of sight. I looked back quickly, forcing my attention to the table, to the cup, to anything that kept me here. Present. Normal. Safe. But it didn't hold. Because underneath it all, the truth was still there. Quiet. Unspoken. Just like it had always been in this house. And now, I was part of it. Roll. It followed me. Not like a thought you can shake off. Not like a bad dream that fades once the sun comes up. It stayed. Quiet. Constant. Heavy. I felt it in the smallest moments. Standing at the sink, watching water run over my hands, the sound too loud, too steady. Sitting in the living room while the TV played something I couldn't follow, voices blending into noise that didn't reach me. Even walking from one room to another, it was there, just beneath everything. The secret didn't need to speak. It just existed. And I carried it. Alone. That's what made it different. Because it wasn't mine. Not really. It belonged to her. To him. To something that happened long before I had a place in this world. And yet, here it was, sitting inside me like it had always been there. I found myself watching people differently. My mother, moving through the house with that same quiet routine. The way she hummed under her breath sometimes, just like her. The way she didn't ask questions that might disturb the surface. Did she know? That question lingered longer than I wanted it to. I studied her face when she wasn't looking, searching for something, anything, that might tell me she had felt it too. That she had seen the cracks and chosen, like everyone else, to step around them. But there was nothing clear. Just normal. Just life. And that almost made it worse. Because if she didn't know, then I was the only one standing here, holding something that could change everything. My chest tightened at that thought. Not from fear. From weight. Because knowing something like this, it doesn't just sit quietly. It asks something of you. It presses. It waits. I tried to push it away. Tried to tell myself it wasn't my place. That some things are meant to stay buried. That maybe she kept it hidden for a reason. But every time I tried to let it go, it came back stronger. Clearer. The rain. The truth. Daniel. I couldn't separate them anymore. I stepped outside at one point, needing air. Real air. The kind that moves, that doesn't feel trapped inside walls that have heard too much. The sky was pale, stretched thin with clouds that looked like they might break later. I stood there, breathing in slow, steady pulls, letting the coolness settle into my chest. It helped. A little. But it didn't take it away. Nothing did. Because this wasn't just something I had learned. It was something I had inherited. Not by choice. But by accident. Or maybe, by design. That thought crept in quietly. What if she knew someone would find it? What if this wasn't just a secret, but a passing? A burden handed down without words. I swallowed hard, the idea settling deeper than I wanted it to. Because if that was true, then I wasn't just carrying her story. I was carrying her silence too. And silence. It has weight. The kind you don't notice at first. Until it becomes everything you feel. I closed my eyes for a moment, standing there, letting the wind brush against my face, trying to find something solid to hold on to. But there was nothing. Just that quiet, steady pressure inside me. Waiting. Unanswered. Unshared. And growing heavier with every second I kept it to myself. I told myself I wouldn't go back up there. Said it out loud, even. Quiet, but firm, like the words might hold if I gave them shape. They can stay buried. That's what I said. But by late afternoon, I was already halfway up the stairs. I didn't remember deciding. My feet just moved. Slow at first. Then steadier. Like something inside me had already made the choice and my body was just catching up. Each step creaked under my weight, the sound stretching out in the quiet house. I paused once, hand resting against the wall, listening. Nothing. No voices. No movement. Just that same stillness. Waiting. I exhaled, long and slow, then climbed the rest of the way. The attic door stood exactly where I left it. Closed. Unchanged. But it didn't feel the same. It felt like a boundary now. Something I had crossed once, and wasn't sure I should cross again. My hand hovered over the handle. For a second. I almost turned back. Almost. But then that pull came again. Stronger this time. Not curiosity. Not even fear. Something deeper. Unfinished. I turned the handle. The door opened with that same soft groan, the smell of old wood and dust rushing out to meet me like it had been waiting all day. It wrapped around me instantly, familiar now, but heavier. I stepped inside. The light had shifted. Late afternoon glow slipping through the small window, casting long shadows across the floor. The same boxes. The same quiet. But the air felt different. Like it remembered. My eyes moved straight to it. The diary. Still where I left it. Still closed. Still holding everything. I walked over slowly, each step deliberate, like I was approaching something fragile or dangerous. I sat down in the same spot. The floor felt colder now. Harder. Real. For a moment, I didn't touch it. I just looked. The worn leather cover. The faint lines where time had softened it. The edges slightly uneven from years of being opened, closed, held, hidden. It didn't look like something that could carry so much. But it did. My hand moved before I could stop it. Fingers brushing against the cover. This time, it didn't feel unfamiliar. It felt known. That was worse. I picked it up, slower than before, the weight settling into my hands like something I had already accepted, even if I hadn't said it out loud yet. Because I knew what this meant. There was no halfway anymore. No stepping in and out. No pretending I could just leave it unfinished. I opened it. The pages fell easily now, like they had been waiting for this moment. No resistance. No hesitation. Just a quiet surrender. I found my place without trying. Like my hands remembered what my mind was still catching up to. And as my eyes dropped back to her words, that feeling returned. Not shock. Not disbelief. Something steadier. Heavier. Like I had crossed into something I couldn't step back from. And this time, I didn't try to. I wasn't ready for their names. I thought I was. After everything else, after her, after him, after Daniel, I thought there was nothing left that could surprise me. But I was wrong. They knew more than they ever said. My breath stopped. Not slowed. Not caught. Stopped. I stared at the line, my eyes refusing to move past it, like if I didn't read further, I could hold on to something, anything, that still felt untouched. My parents. No. That didn't fit. That couldn't fit. I forced myself to keep reading, even as something inside me tightened, sharp and defensive. Your mother asked me once. Not directly. She circled it, the way people do when they're afraid of the answer. The words blurred for a second, then snapped back into focus. Circled it. That sounded like her. Careful. Gentle. Never pushing too hard. But asking, still asking. My chest felt heavy now, like the air had thickened around me again. I told her it was just her imagination. A lie. Simple. Clean. Practiced. And suddenly, I remembered something. A night. Years ago. My mother standing in the kitchen, back turned, hands resting flat against the counter. I had walked in without thinking, said something small, nothing important. She didn't turn right away. Just stood there. Still. Like she was holding something in. I didn't understand it then. Didn't ask. But now, it came back differently. Clearer. He heard it too, but he chose not to question her. My father. That line hit quieter, but deeper. Because that was him. Steady. Avoiding conflict. Choosing peace over truth when the truth felt too heavy to carry. My hands trembled slightly as I turned the page, my pulse slow but heavy in my chest. They protected you from it. In their own way. Protected me. The word didn't comfort me. It unsettled me. Because protection like that, it comes with silence. With distance. With things left unsaid. And suddenly, all those small moments, those pauses, those looks, those conversations that ended too quickly. They weren't empty. They were full. I just wasn't meant to see it. Until now. It came back to me all at once. Not gently. Like something pushed forward from deep inside, demanding to be seen. You were too young to remember it clearly. That's what they told me. Over and over. Anytime I asked about that year. That summer when things felt different, even to a child who didn't have the words for it yet. I believed them. Of course I did. Because when you're small, you trust the people who hold your world together. You don't question the edges. You don't look for cracks. But now, sitting there with her words in front of me, I realized something. I did remember. Not everything. But enough. A sound. Raised voices, late at night, muffled through walls that felt thinner than they should have been. Not shouting exactly, but tight. Controlled. Like something was trying to stay contained and failing. I remember sitting at the top of the stairs, knees pulled to my chest, listening without understanding. And then, silence. Too fast. Too complete. The kind that feels forced. They told you it was nothing. Her handwriting again. Steady. Certain. They said it was just a disagreement. That everything was fine. My throat tightened. That's exactly what they said. Word for word. I could hear it now, clear as anything. My mother's voice, softer than usual. My father standing just behind her, nodding slightly, like the truth could be agreed upon into existence. It's nothing, sweetheart. Just grown-up talk. Nothing. That word felt different now. Heavy. Wrong. Because nothing doesn't leave echoes. Nothing doesn't sit in your chest years later, waiting for a moment like this to make sense of it. They were trying to protect you. That line didn't feel like comfort. It felt like confirmation. Because protection, I realized, sometimes looks a lot like rewriting the past. Smoothing it out. Taking the sharp edges and hiding them where no one can get cut. But the edges don't disappear. They stay. Waiting. And now. I could feel them. Clear. Sharp. Real. Because what I was told back then wasn't the whole truth. Not even close. It clicked when I wasn't even looking for it. Not a loud realization. No sudden flash. Just a quiet alignment. Like pieces sliding into place without asking permission. I was staring at a line she'd written weeks, maybe months, after that night. He stopped fixing the gate after that. It sounded small. Meaningless, even. But something about it pulled at me. The gate. I could see it clear as anything now, backyard, slightly crooked, always squeaking when it opened. I used to hate that sound. It echoed through the whole yard like it was announcing you. And I remembered asking once why it was never fixed. My grandfather had just shrugged. "'S fine the way it is." That wasn't like him. He fixed everything. Always had. But after that year, some things stayed broken. I turned the page slowly, my heartbeat steady but heavy now. He started spending more time in the garage. Another line. Another piece. The smell of oil came back to me instantly. That thick, metallic scent that clung to the air whenever the garage door was open. He'd be out there for hours sometimes, tools spread out, working on things that didn't really need fixing. Or maybe, he just needed something to do with his hands. Something that didn't require looking at her. My chest tightened. Because now it wasn't just her words anymore. It was my memories, shifting to match them. Reforming. Making sense in ways they never had before. Daniel stopped staying for dinner. That one hit sharper. Because I remembered that too. The way he'd show up less often. The way his visits got shorter, more spaced out. Always polite. Always present. But never fully there. I thought it was life. Work. Distance. But now, it felt intentional. Like he was stepping back from something he couldn't stand too close to. I leaned back slightly, the wood beneath me creaking low, my mind moving faster now, connecting things I hadn't even known were connected. Every small detail. Every shift. Every silence. They weren't random. They were responses. Reactions. Ripples from something bigger. Something I had been standing in the middle of my entire life, without ever seeing the water move. And now, I couldn't unsee it. Because once the dots connect, they don't come apart again. I thought I had reached the worst of it. I was wrong. It was just one line. Quiet. Almost careful. I told him it was his. My breath left me before I even understood why. My eyes stayed on the words, but my mind, it lagged behind, like it didn't want to catch up. Like it knew what waited on the other side of understanding and refused to go there. Him. Not my grandfather. The other one. The one standing in the rain. The one she never let go of. My fingers tightened against the page, the paper bending slightly under the pressure. No. That didn't. But it did. I couldn't bear to see him walk away thinking he had lost everything. My chest tightened painfully. Because now, it wasn't just about who Daniel was. It was about what she had done with that truth. She hadn't just hidden it. She had given it, in two directions. One man carrying a child that might not be his. Another believing it was. Two lives built on the same fragile lie. And her, standing in the middle of it. Holding both ends. I thought it would give him peace. The sentence felt soft. But it cut deep. Peace built on something like that. It doesn't stay peaceful. It lingers. It twists. It waits. My throat went dry, my heart beat slow but heavy now, like each beat carried something it didn't want to. Because this wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was layered. Carefully placed. A truth split in half and handed out like it could live in two places at once without breaking everything around it. I told myself it was kindness. That word, kindness, it didn't sit right. Not here. Not like this. Because kindness isn't supposed to fracture people. Isn't supposed to create a space where no one stands on solid ground. But that's exactly what this was. A life built on shifting truth. On versions. On silence that held more than it protected. I leaned back slightly, the attic pressing in around me again, heavier now. Because suddenly, I understood something I hadn't before. This wasn't just one betrayal. It was two. And neither of them had ever been spoken out loud. I didn't know where to put the love anymore. That was the strangest part. It was still there, strong, steady, familiar, but now it didn't land the way it used to. It didn't sit clean in my chest. It tangled. I looked down at her words, then closed my eyes, and suddenly I was back in her kitchen again. The soft clink of a spoon against a cup. The low hum of her voice. The way she'd say my name like it meant something. That wasn't a lie. It couldn't be. But then the other side pushed in. The rain. The silence. The choices she made when no one was watching. Both things existed. And I didn't know how to hold them at the same time. My chest tightened, a slow pull in two directions. Because I still loved her. That hadn't changed. Not even a little. If anything, it felt heavier now. More complicated. Like loving her meant carrying all of this too. I swallowed, my throat tight, and thought about my grandfather. The way he sat in that chair, steady, present, never asking for more than what was given. Did he know everything? Or just enough? And did it matter? Because either way, he stayed. That meant something. Didn't it? But then Daniel's face came to mind. That distance. That quiet tension I used to brush off. He carried it too. In a different way. And now I was here, feeling it for the first time. Late. Too late to ask. Too late to hear it from them. I pressed my hand against my chest, like I could steady the pull inside me. Because this wasn't just about truth anymore. It was about loyalty. About what you do when the people you love aren't who you thought they were. Or maybe, when they are, just more than you understood. I still love you, I whispered. And I meant it. But it didn't feel simple anymore. It felt like something I had to hold carefully. Like it could break, if I didn't learn how to carry both sides of it at once. It hit me in the quiet lines. Not the big ones. Not the confessions that cracked everything open. The small ones. The ones she didn't underline, didn't press harder into the page, the ones that slipped through like she didn't think they mattered. I got used to holding my breath. I stopped there. My chest tightened before I even understood why. Because that wasn't about one moment. That was a life. I could see her again, but different now. Not just the woman who moved through the kitchen with calm hands and a soft voice. But someone who had learned how to exist inside herself without letting anything spill over. Holding her breath. Not speaking. Not asking. Not breaking. I learned which parts of me had to stay quiet. The words sat heavy. I thought about all the times she paused mid-sentence. The way she would smile instead of finishing a thought. The way she redirected conversations so smoothly you didn't even notice you'd been turned. That wasn't just habit. That was survival. My throat tightened and I swallowed slowly, like even that felt too loud. Because suddenly, her strength didn't look the same. It wasn't just wisdom. It wasn't just patience. It was restraint. Constant. Careful. Lonely. I loved them both in ways that didn't belong in the same life. That line didn't break. It ached. Deep. Quiet. Because there was no anger in it. No defense. Just truth. And something underneath it. Something tired. I closed my eyes for a second, picturing her sitting alone at that table after everyone had gone to bed. The house finally quiet. The mask set down, just for a moment. No one watching. No one asking. Just her, and everything she couldn't say out loud. I don't think I was ever fully at peace again. That was it. That was the part that settled deepest. Because it explained everything. The pauses. The distance. The way she held on just a little too long. She wasn't hiding because she didn't care. She was carrying something that never let her rest. And suddenly, I didn't just see what she did. I felt what it cost her. It was written so quietly. I almost missed it. Tucked between heavier lines, like it didn't deserve its own space. I stopped writing to him after Daniel turned 5. My eyes lingered there. 5. Such a small age. Such an ordinary number. But something about it pulled at me, slow and deep, like a thread I hadn't noticed before. I read it again. Slower this time. Stopped writing. Not because she forgot. Not because it faded. Because she chose to. My chest tightened, a dull ache settling in. I knew if I didn't, I would keep going back. That line, it wasn't regret. It was resolve. And it felt heavier than anything else she had written. I could picture it now, her sitting at that same table, pen in hand, words forming that would never be sent again. Letters folded and unfolded. Maybe burned. Maybe hidden. A conversation she had to end, alone. I chose the life I had built, not the one I couldn't let go of. The words didn't fight for attention. They didn't explain themselves. They just stood there. Quiet. Final. And for the first time, I felt something shift inside me that wasn't confusion, or fear, or anger. It was understanding. Not complete. Not comfortable. But real. Because this wasn't just about what she had done. It was about what she had given up to keep everything else standing. The love she didn't follow. The truth she didn't speak. The life she didn't choose. All of it, set aside. Not once. But every day after that. I stayed where I was needed. My throat tightened, sharper this time. Needed. That word carried weight. Because it meant she didn't stay for herself. She stayed for them. For the family. For the version of everything that didn't fall apart. I thought about all those years again. The steady dinners. The quiet routines. The way nothing ever seemed broken, even when something clearly was. That didn't happen by accident. That was built. Maintained. Protected. By her. And suddenly, her silence didn't just feel like hiding. It felt like holding. Holding everything together. Even if it meant holding herself back. I exhaled slowly, my chest still heavy. Because now. I could see it. Not just the choices she made. But the ones she didn't allow herself to make. And somehow. That felt like the deepest sacrifice of all. It didn't feel like remembering anymore. It felt like rewriting. The same scenes were there, the same rooms, the same voices, the same small, ordinary moments, but now they moved differently, like someone had shifted the light just enough to reveal what had always been hiding underneath. I saw her in the doorway. Not just standing there, watching us laugh, but pausing, just a second longer than she should have. I used to think she was simply taking it all in, enjoying the moment. Now it felt like something else. Like she was measuring it. Holding it carefully. Making sure nothing slipped. I saw my grandfather at the table, nodding along, smiling in that quiet way of his. I always thought it meant peace. Contentment. But now. I noticed the stillness. Too still. Like every movement was chosen, not natural. Like calm wasn't something he felt, but something he maintained. My chest tightened as the memory shifted again. Daniel, leaning against the wall, arms crossed, watching. Not distant exactly. Not cold. Just, separate. As if he was part of the room, but not fully inside it. I never questioned that before. It was just how things were. But now I could see it, the space between them. Invisible. Unspoken. Always there. And me. I was in the middle of it all, laughing, talking, moving freely through something I didn't understand. Because no one told me. No one showed me where to look. I pressed my fingers lightly against the page, grounding myself in the present, but the memories kept shifting, rearranging themselves into something sharper, clearer. Nothing had been fake. That was the strange part. The laughter was real. The love was real. But it wasn't complete. It lived alongside something else. Something quiet. Something heavy. And suddenly, my childhood didn't feel broken. It felt layered. Built on moments that meant more than I knew at the time. Moments that carried weight I couldn't see. Until now. And the hardest part was realizing I had lived inside that truth my whole life. without ever knowing it was there. The pages started to feel thinner. Not just in my hands, but in her voice. The entries grew shorter. Less space between the lines. Fewer explanations, like she had run out of reasons to keep telling the story the same way. Or maybe, she was getting closer to something she couldn't dress up anymore. I don't write as much now. That's how one of them began. Simple. Almost casual. But the words beneath it felt tired. I've said most of what I needed to say. I paused there, my fingers resting against the edge of the page, not turning it yet. Needed. Not wanted. That difference sat heavy. Because it meant this wasn't about remembering anymore. It was about finishing. The attic felt quieter now, like even the wood had stopped shifting. The air hung still, thick with something I couldn't name. I turned the page. Slow. Careful. My hands don't feel the same when I write. I could picture it, her sitting alone, pen moving slower than it used to, the strength in her fingers fading, but still pressing forward. Still trying to leave something behind. For a long time, I thought this would make it lighter. That line lingered. I looked down at the pages already filled, the years folded into them, the weight of everything she had carried laid out in careful ink. It didn't look lighter. It looked complete. But not peaceful. Some things don't get lighter. You just learn how to hold them. My chest tightened again, but this time it wasn't sharp. It was steady. Like something settling into place. Because that's what she had done, wasn't it? Held it. All of it. Without letting it spill into the world she built around herself. I turned another page. The handwriting was shakier now. Not by much, but enough to notice. Enough to feel time pressing in. I think about telling the truth sometimes. My breath caught slightly. Even now? After everything? After a lifetime of silence? But the next line came quickly. I don't think it would fix anything. I exhaled slowly, the air leaving me heavier than it came in. Because that was it. That was the edge she had lived on. Knowing. Carrying. Choosing. And never crossing that line. The pages were running out now. I could feel it. Not just in the thickness between my fingers, but in her words. They weren't reaching anymore. They were closing. And for the first time since I opened the diary, I wasn't sure I was ready to see what she chose to say last. The words felt heavier near the end. Not louder. Just heavier. I should have been braver. I stopped there. My fingers tightened slightly against the page, the paper soft but unyielding beneath my touch. That line didn't explain itself. It didn't need to. Braver. Not kinder. Not smarter. Braver. My chest pulled tight, slow and deep, like something was being drawn out of me with it. I thought I was protecting everyone. I could hear her voice in that one. Not the steady version she showed us, but something quieter. Thinner. Like it had been worn down over time. I see now. I was protecting the life we had, not the truth we needed. That line lingered. The attic felt colder suddenly, the air brushing against my skin in a way that made me aware of every inch of it. I swallowed, but my throat stayed dry. Because she knew. Not just what she had done, but what it cost. I watched him grow up and wondered who he saw when he looked in the mirror. Daniel. The words didn't need to say his name anymore. I felt it anyway. That quiet, aching question sitting behind everything. What do you do when a truth lives inside someone, and they don't even know it? My breathing slowed, not from calm, but from weight. I told myself love would be enough. A pause in the writing. Longer space before the next line. It felt intentional. It felt like she had stopped there for a while before continuing. It wasn't. That was the part that broke something in me. Not because it was loud, but because it was honest in a way nothing else had been. No defense. No justification. Just acceptance. I loved them both. And in doing so, I failed them both in ways I can't undo. The ink pressed deeper there, like her hand had finally given in to something it had been holding back. I could almost feel it, the weight of years behind that sentence. The quiet moments. The sleepless nights. The looks she never returned fully. All of it, sitting inside those words. I don't know if forgiveness is something I deserve. My chest tightened again, sharper this time. Because that wasn't something she ever showed us. That doubt. That question. To us, she was certain. Steady. Whole. But here. She wasn't. Here, she was carrying something she never set down. And for the first time, I didn't just see her choices. I felt her regret. My name wasn't there. But I felt it anyway. Right between the lines, in the spaces where she didn't write anything at all, it felt like she was looking straight at me. I don't know who will read this. That's how the entry began. My breath slowed without me noticing, like my body understood before my mind did. If you are someone who loves me. I stopped. The words settled deeper than they should have. Because that was me. It had always been me. My fingers tightened slightly on the page, the paper shifting just enough to remind me it was real. That this wasn't something imagined. That she had written this, for someone. Maybe for anyone. But it felt like it had found me. I hope you can see more than what I did wrong. My chest tightened, sharp and sudden. Because that's exactly where I had been, stuck in the wrong, in the choices, in the weight of everything she had carried and hidden. I swallowed hard, my throat dry. I hope you remember the way I loved you. That line. It didn't ask for forgiveness. It didn't defend anything. It just reached. Quiet. Honest. And it pulled something inside me with it. Because I did remember. Every small thing. The way she said my name. The way she listened. The way she held on just a little longer than necessary. That wasn't gone. It had never been part of the lie. I was not only my mistakes. The words felt fragile. But firm. Like something she needed to say, even if no one was there to hear it when she wrote it. My eyes blurred slightly, but I didn't look away. I was also the love I gave, the life I tried to protect, and the choices I lived with every day after. That line stayed with me. It didn't erase anything. But it widened it. Made space for something more than just the hurt. I hope you can hold both. I let out a slow breath, my chest still heavy, but steadier now. Because that's what this was asking of me. Not to forget. Not to excuse. But to carry it, whole. The truth. And the love. At the same time. The last pages felt different. Not just quieter. Certain. Like she had stopped circling things and finally stepped into the center of it. My fingers hesitated before turning the page, but something in me already knew this was it. Whatever she had held back the longest, it was here. I never told him the whole truth. My chest tightened immediately. Him. I didn't need her to say the name. I knew. My grandfather. The man who stayed. The man who carried something without ever asking for more. My breath slowed, heavy, uneven, as I read on. I told him Daniel was not his. That part. I already knew. Or thought I did. But the next line. That's where everything shifted. I never told him there was a chance he was. I stopped breathing. Completely. My eyes stayed fixed on the words, but my mind struggled to hold them, like they didn't want to settle into something real. A chance. Not certainty. Not a clean truth. But something uncertain. Something she had chosen to shape. To control. My hands trembled slightly, the page soft beneath my fingertips. Because suddenly, everything changed again. This wasn't just a secret. It wasn't even just a lie. It was something in between. A truth, withheld in a way that created two different realities at once. He lived his life believing one thing. My throat tightened. And the other man lived his life believing another. The words echoed. Not loudly. But endlessly. Two lives. Built on different versions of the same moment. And her, the only one who knew both. I thought it would hurt less this way. A slow, painful breath escaped me. Less for who? That question lingered. Because pain doesn't disappear when you divide it. It spreads. It settles. It waits. I don't know if I was protecting them, or protecting myself. That was it. The center. The truth she hadn't been able to name before. My chest felt heavy, but not sharp anymore. Just full. Because this wasn't about choosing one man over the other. Or one truth over another. It was about her trying to live in a space where both could exist, without destroying everything around her. And maybe, that space never really existed at all. I carried the only version that was real. I stared at that line, letting it sink in. Because now I understood. The biggest secret wasn't just what happened. It was that she was the only one who ever truly knew it. And she took that full truth. With her. I didn't turn the page. I just sat there. The diary rested open in my hands, but the words had stopped moving. They stayed where they were, heavy and complete, like they didn't need anything more from me. The attic was still. Not quiet in a comforting way, just still. The kind of stillness that settles after something has been said that can't be taken back. I could hear my own breathing. Slow now. Deep. But each breath felt like it carried more weight than it should. I didn't try to push it away this time. Didn't try to make sense of it. I just let it be there. The smell of old wood lingered around me, thick and familiar. Dust hung in the air, catching the last of the fading light, drifting slowly like time had nowhere else to go. My fingers rested lightly on the page, no longer gripping, no longer resisting. Just holding. Because that's what it felt like now. Not reading. Not discovering. Holding. Everything she had carried. Everything I had just been given. My chest ached, but not sharp anymore. Dull. Steady. Like something had settled into place that wasn't going anywhere. I thought about her. Not the version I had lost. Not the one in the diary. But something in between. Someone who lived a whole life inside herself while showing us only the parts that wouldn't break us. And for the first time, I didn't question it. I didn't fight it. I just sat with it. The truth. The silence. The space in between. The house creaked softly around me, the same way it always had, but now it felt different. Like it knew. Like it had always known. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting everything settle without trying to move it, without trying to fix it. Because some things, they don't ask to be fixed. They ask to be felt. And in that quiet, in that still, unmoving moment, I finally understood what it meant to carry something without saying a word. It hit all at once. No warning. No slow build. Just there. My chest tightened so sharply I had to grab onto something. My hand found the edge of the diary, fingers digging in like it was the only solid thing left in the room. I tried to breathe. In, out. But the rhythm wouldn't come back. Each breath caught halfway, like my body didn't trust the air anymore. No, no. The words slipped out under my breath, thin and broken, like they didn't belong to me. Because nothing felt like it belonged anymore. Not the memories. Not the truth. Not even the version of myself that had walked into this attic thinking I understood anything at all. My head dropped forward, elbows pressing into my knees, the diary tilting in my grip. The wood beneath me felt harder now, colder, like it was pushing back. Everything was too much. Her voice. His silence. Daniel's distance. My parents' quiet knowing. All of it collided at once, overlapping, tangling, refusing to separate into something I could hold. I pressed my hand against my chest again, harder this time, like I could stop whatever was breaking open inside. But it didn't stop. It spread. A dull, heavy ache that filled every space, leaving no room to think, no room to steady myself. I shook my head, slow at first, then sharper, like I could force it all out. But it stayed. It stayed. A sound broke out of me then, low, uneven, somewhere between a breath and a sob. It caught in my throat, rough and unfamiliar. I hadn't cried. Not yet. But I felt it sitting there, waiting, pressing up against something I didn't know how to release. Because this wasn't just sadness. It was confusion. It was loss. It was everything I thought I knew collapsing inward, leaving nothing solid behind. I looked down at the diary, but the words blurred now, shifting, refusing to stay still. And for the first time, I didn't recognize the story anymore. Not hers. Not mine. Just fragments. Pieces. And me. Somewhere in the middle of it all. Falling. It came in a flash. Hot. Sharp. So fast it startled me. My hands clenched before I even realized it, fingers tightening around the diary until the edges pressed hard into my skin. My jaw locked, teeth grinding slightly, like my body had found something it could finally hold on to. Anger. Not quiet like everything else. Not heavy. Loud. Alive. Why didn't you tell me? The words slipped out before I could stop them, cutting through the stillness of the attic like they had been waiting there all along. I shook my head, faster now, the movement rough, uneven. All of them. Her. My parents. Even him. Everyone knew something. Everyone carried a piece. And no one said a word. Not to me. Not ever. My chest burned, heat spreading outward, replacing the cold that had settled there before. It felt easier, in a way, simpler. Because anger doesn't ask you to understand. It just demands. I pushed myself up slightly, then stopped, pacing nowhere, stuck between movement and stillness. All those years. My voice cracked, but I didn't stop. All those dinners, all those conversations, and none of it was real? The question hung there, sharp and accusing. But even as I said it, something twisted inside me. Because it was real. That's what made it worse. The laughter. The love. It wasn't fake. It was just, incomplete. And they let me believe it was whole. That's what burned. That's what settled deep and refused to move. I thought about my mother again, her quiet voice, her careful words. She knew something. Maybe not everything, but enough. And she still looked at me the same way. Still smiled. Still acted like there was nothing underneath it all. How do you do that? How do you look at someone you love, and choose silence? My hands dropped slightly, then clenched again, the anger flickering but not fading. Because now. I felt it. Not just the truth. But the choice they all made. To protect. To hide. to carry it without ever letting me in. And suddenly, I wasn't just hurt. I felt left out of something that had shaped my entire life. And no one had thought I deserved to know. It softened, without asking. The anger didn't disappear. It didn't vanish or resolve itself into anything clean. It just loosened. Like something inside me finally exhaled after holding tight for too long. I looked down at the page again, but this time I didn't see the lies first. I saw her. Not the version I had built in my head. Not the one I lost. Just her. I was afraid of what the truth would do to them. That line felt different now. Not defensive. Not excusing anything. Just honest. And suddenly, the room didn't feel as sharp. The edges softened, just a little. Because fear. I understood that. Not her choices. Not fully. But the feeling behind them. The kind that makes you freeze. The kind that makes you hold on to something broken because you're too afraid to see what happens when it falls apart completely. I let out a slow breath, my shoulders dropping slightly without me realizing it. Because what if it wasn't just about hiding? What if it was about holding everything together the only way she knew how? I thought silence would keep them safe. That line settled deeper. And I thought about it, really thought about it. The family I grew up in. The steady dinners. The laughter that never felt forced. The way nothing ever truly shattered, even when something underneath clearly had. That didn't happen by accident. That was built. Protected. Maintained. By her. My chest tightened again, but not in the same way. This wasn't anger. It was something heavier, but quieter. Because she wasn't just someone who made a mistake. She was someone who lived with it. Every day. Chose it. Every day. I carried it so they wouldn't have to. I closed my eyes for a second, letting that line settle fully. Because now. I could see it. The cost. Not just what she did. But what she endured to keep doing it. Alone. And for the first time. I didn't just feel what it did to us. I felt what it did to her. I couldn't decide who to blame. That was the part that wouldn't settle. Every time I thought I understood it, really understood it, it shifted again, like something that refused to stay in one place long enough to be judged. I looked down at the diary, then away, then back again, like the answers might rearrange themselves if I gave them enough time. But they didn't. Because there wasn't a clear answer. That's what made it so hard. She chose silence. That felt wrong. But so did the alternative. Telling the truth. Breaking everything open. Letting it spill into a family that had somehow survived by not looking too closely at what held it together. Would that have been better? Or just louder? My chest tightened again, not from pain this time, but from the weight of not knowing. Because every side of it carried something. My grandfather, who stayed, who chose not to ask, who built a life around something incomplete. Was that strength? Or surrender? Daniel, who felt something was off, who pulled away just enough to protect himself without ever naming why. Was that awareness? Or distance? And her. Standing in the middle of it all, making choices that didn't fit into anything simple. Was she protecting? Or avoiding? Loving? Or hurting? I rubbed my hands together slowly, like I could warm something inside me that felt stuck between two extremes. Because I couldn't land anywhere. Every time I leaned toward anger, it softened into understanding. Every time I tried to understand, something sharp pulled me back toward hurt. There was no clean line. No clear right. No obvious wrong. Just people, making choices inside a moment they couldn't fully control. I don't know what I should have done. Her words. Soft. uncertain. And for the first time, I believed that. Not as an excuse, but as truth. Because maybe there wasn't a right answer waiting somewhere she missed. Maybe there was only the one she could live with. And the ones everyone else carried without knowing. I exhaled slowly, my chest still heavy, but quieter now. Because this wasn't a story about good and bad. It was something harder than that. Something human. And human doesn't always make sense. The thought wouldn't leave me. It didn't come loud. Just steady. Sitting there, waiting. Should I tell them? I stared at the last page, but I wasn't reading anymore. The words had already done their work. Now it was just me, and what came after. My fingers rested on the edge of the diary, tracing the worn leather slowly, like I was trying to feel something through it. The attic felt quieter than before, like even the air had stepped back to give the question space. If I told them, everything would change. Not in a loud way. Not all at once. But slowly. Deeply. The kind of change that settles into people and doesn't leave. I thought about my mother. Her soft voice. The way she avoided certain things without ever making it obvious. What would happen if I put this in front of her? Would it answer something for her? Or break something she had learned to live without? My chest tightened slightly. And my father? Would he go quiet? Would he already know enough to not ask more? Or would this be the thing that finally pushed past all those years of choosing not to look too closely? I swallowed hard, my throat dry again. Because this wasn't just information. It was weight. And once you hand that to someone, you can't take it back. I don't think it would fix anything. Her words echoed again. Soft. Certain. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting that line settle into the question. Was this about truth? Or about impact? Because sometimes, those aren't the same thing. The house creaked gently around me, the sound low and familiar, like it had heard this question before and already knew there wasn't a simple answer. I opened my eyes again, staring at the diary. At everything it held. At everything it had already changed. And for the first time, I understood something I hadn't before. Knowing the truth doesn't always mean you should share it. Sometimes, it just means you have to decide what to do with it, on your own. I noticed it immediately. Not because anything had changed. But because I had. We were sitting at the table again. Same chairs. Same plates. The quiet clink of cutlery, the low hum of conversation filling the room in that familiar, easy way. It should have felt normal. It didn't. I watched them. Really watched. My mother reached for the salt, her hand brushing lightly against my father's as she passed it. A small thing. Nothing unusual. But I saw the pause now, just a fraction of a second longer than it needed to be. Like something unspoken lived in that space. My father nodded at something she said, a soft, almost automatic movement. He didn't ask questions. Didn't lean in. Just accepted. The way he always had. And suddenly, it didn't look like peace. It looked like practice. My chest tightened slightly, but I stayed still, letting the moment play out. Across the table, Daniel laughed at something. Loud enough. Easy enough. But it didn't reach his eyes the way it should have. I had seen that before. But I never understood it. Now. I couldn't unsee it. The way his gaze shifted, quick, almost instinctive, toward my mother, then away again before it lingered too long. Not obvious. But there. Always there. Like a question he never asked out loud. I felt it settle into me, quiet and heavy. Because this wasn't new. None of it was. It had always been here. Woven into the way they moved, the way they spoke, the way they didn't. I took a slow breath, the air warm, filled with the smell of food and something deeper, something older. Familiar. But different now. Because I could see the layers. The spaces between words. The weight behind silence. And the hardest part was knowing they were still living inside it. Just like they always had. Only now. I was the one who could finally see it. I couldn't stop seeing them. The small things. The ones that never asked to be noticed. They were everywhere now. My father folded his napkin a certain way, slow, precise, like he needed something to control. I had seen him do it 100 times, maybe more. It used to feel like habit. Now it felt like holding himself together. My mother laughed at something, light, easy, but her eyes dropped just a second too soon, like the moment couldn't stay in place for too long. Like joy had edges she had learned not to lean on. I felt it in that space. That quiet shift. Across the room, Daniel leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, watching. Not intruding. Not stepping fully in. Just there. Half present. Like he belonged, but not completely. I had always accepted that. Just the way he was. But now I noticed the details. The way he stood closer to the exit than anyone else. The way his gaze moved, never settling too long on one person, especially not her. Especially not my mother. And when she spoke to him, her voice stayed gentle, but careful. Slightly measured, like every word passed through something before it reached him. That wasn't distance. That was awareness. I felt it in my chest, slow and heavy. Because none of this was new. Not really. It had been there all along. In the pauses. In the glances. In the way conversations shifted just before they got too close to something real. Even the house felt different now. The same walls. The same furniture. The same soft creaks in the floorboards. But now, those sounds felt like they carried memory. Like they had absorbed years of silence and were still holding onto it. I stood there, taking it in, piece by piece. Because this wasn't something I had discovered. It was something I had finally learned how to see. And once you see it, it doesn't go back to being invisible. I played it out in my head before I ever said a word. Over and over. Different versions. Different endings. None of them felt right. I could see myself sitting across from my mother at the table, the same place we'd had 100 ordinary conversations. The light hitting her face just the same. Her hands wrapped around a cup like always. But this time, the words would be different. I found something. That's how it would start. Simple. Careful. Her eyes would lift slowly, searching my face for what I wasn't saying yet. I could already see it, the shift. That quiet alertness she carried when something moved too close to the surface. What do you mean? Her voice would stay steady. It always did. And then I'd have to decide. Do I say it plainly? Do I circle it like she always did? Do I break it open, or protect it the way they all had? My chest tightened just thinking about it. Because once I said it, there would be no pulling it back. I imagined my father in the room too. Sitting slightly turned, listening without interrupting. The way he always did. Would he look at me? Or would he already know where this was going? Would he stop me? Or let it happen, the same way he let everything else settle without being spoken? And Daniel. That part felt heavier. Because what do you even say? How do you hand someone a truth that might change how they see themselves, without breaking something inside them? I could see his face in my mind. That quiet distance. That unspoken question he had carried for years without naming. What if I gave it a name? What if I answered something he had learned not to ask? My breath caught, uneven. Because that wasn't just a conversation. That was a turning point. A line you don't cross unless you're ready for everything that comes after. I exhaled slowly, the imagined scene dissolving around me. Because every version ended the same way. Silence. Not the kind that hides things. The kind that comes after something has been said, and can't be undone. And I wasn't sure if I was ready to be the one who broke it. It wasn't the truth itself that scared me. It was what it would do. I felt it sitting there, just beneath everything, like a crack running through the floor I was standing on. Invisible for now, but one step in the wrong direction, and it could split wide open. I leaned back in my chair, the wood pressing cold against my spine, grounding me just enough to stay still. If I said it out loud, if I gave shape to what I knew, there would be no going back to before. I pictured the table again. The same one. The same chairs. But the air would feel different. Heavier. Thinner. Like something had been pulled out of it that could never be put back. My mother's face came to mind first. Not shocked. Not loud. Just quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that comes when something lands deeper than words can reach. Would she deny it? Would she already know? Or would I be the one to take whatever she had learned to live with, and drag it back into the light? My chest tightened at that thought. Because maybe she had already made her peace with it. In her own way. And I would be the one undoing that. My father. He wouldn't argue. He wouldn't shout. That almost made it worse. He would listen. Then go still. And that stillness. It carried more weight than anything else. And Daniel. That's where the fear settled deepest. Because this wasn't just a story for him. It was identity. It was belonging. It was everything he had built his life around without ever questioning the foundation beneath it. What happens when that foundation shifts? Do you rebuild? Or do you lose yourself trying to figure out what was real to begin with? I swallowed hard, my throat dry again. Because truth doesn't just reveal things. It rearranges them. And not always in ways you can control. The house creaked softly around me, the sound familiar but different now, like it carried a warning I hadn't noticed before. Some things stay hidden for a reason. Not because they don't matter. But because once they're seen, they change everything. I went back to the same pages. Not because I wanted to. Because I couldn't leave them the way they were, half understood, half felt. My fingers found the edges almost on their own, flipping past everything else until the paper I recognized settled beneath my hand again. I told him the truth that night. I stared at it longer this time. Not rushing. Letting it sit. The weight of it didn't hit as sharply now, but it went deeper. Like it had found a place to stay instead of just passing through. I turned the page. I told him yes. That line still didn't soften. It didn't change. But I saw it differently now. Not just as a moment of betrayal, but as a moment she couldn't escape once it existed. A point where everything split. I swallowed slowly, my throat tight but steady. Another page. I prayed Daniel would never carry it. That one stayed with me longer than before. Because now, I understood what it meant. Not just the truth. The uncertainty. The weight of not knowing who you are in the way you thought you did. I pressed my fingers into the page slightly, grounding myself. Then I turned back further. I told him it was his. The other lie. The other side. Two truths given in different directions. Two lives built around them. And her, in the middle. I let out a slow breath, my chest rising and falling more evenly now. Because reading it again didn't shock me the same way. It settled it. Placed it. Connected it. Each line no longer stood alone. They formed something. A pattern. A path. A life she had walked step by step, choice by choice. I closed my eyes for a second, the words still clear in my mind. Because now, it wasn't just about what she did. It was about how she lived with it. And how I would. I opened my eyes again, staring down at the pages. They hadn't changed. But I had. And somehow, that made them heavier. And clearer at the same time. It wasn't about the lie. Not really. That's what shifted. I sat there, the diary open, the same words staring back at me, but something underneath them finally settled into place. This wasn't just about what she said or didn't say. It was about what everyone chose to live with. I thought it would hurt less this way. That line came back to me. I had read it before. Felt it before. But now. I understood it differently. Less for who? That question didn't sit the same anymore. Because maybe it wasn't about reducing the pain. Maybe it was about distributing it. Spreading it out so no one had to carry the full weight all at once. My chest tightened, but not sharply. Just steady. Because suddenly, I could see it. My grandfather didn't have the full truth. But he had enough. Enough to feel it. Enough to choose not to dig deeper. Daniel didn't have the truth. But he had the distance. The sense that something wasn't right, without ever knowing exactly what. My parents. They carried fragments. Pieces that didn't fit together fully, but enough to shape how they moved, how they avoided, how they protected. And me. I had everything now. All of it. Complete. Heavy. Unshared. I let out a slow breath, my fingers resting lightly on the page. Because the truth hadn't just been hidden. It had been divided. Carefully. Intentionally. Given out in parts that people could live with. No one person carrying the whole thing. Except her. And now. Except me. That realization settled deeper than anything else. Because this wasn't just something I had discovered. It was something I had inherited. Not the story. Not the choices. But the weight. And for the first time, I understood why she had kept it the way she did. Not to erase it. But to make sure it didn't break everyone all at once. It didn't start with her. That was the part one hadn't seen before. I was sitting there, the diary resting in my lap, when something shifted, not in the words, but behind them. Like a shadow stretching further back than I had been willing to look. I learned silence from my mother. The line was small. Almost buried. But it opened something. I could picture it now, another kitchen, another woman standing at a sink, hands moving, mouth closed, carrying things that never made it into the air. The same pauses. The same careful way of speaking around things instead of through them. This didn't begin with one choice. It was older than that. Passed down. Refined. Perfected. My chest tightened slowly, not from shock, but from recognition. Because I had seen it. Lived inside it. The way hard conversations turned into soft ones. The way questions were answered just enough, but never fully. The way truth wasn't denied, it was redirected. Gently. Quietly. Until it settled somewhere out of reach. I thought about my mother again. Her careful words. Her ability to smooth over anything before it could break open. That wasn't just her. That was learned. Inherited. Just like everything else. I thought I was protecting what I loved. Her words echoed, but now they didn't feel like hers alone. They felt familiar. Like something that had been said before, in different ways, across different years. A pattern. One that didn't look like pain at first. It looked like care. Like protection. Like love. But underneath it, it carried something else. Unspoken weight. Unfinished truth. I pressed my hand lightly against the diary, feeling the texture of the cover, grounding myself in the present. Because suddenly, this wasn't just her story. It wasn't just my family. It was something that had been moving through us, quietly shaping everything, long before I ever knew to look for it. And the realization settled in, slow and heavy. This kind of pain doesn't disappear. It changes form. It moves. It waits. Until someone finally sees it. And decides what to do with it next. It didn't stop when I closed the diary. That was the strange part. Her voice stayed. Not loud. Not overwhelming. Just there. Like it had settled into the quiet spaces of my mind and decided not to leave. I thought silence would keep them safe. The words came back first, soft, almost like a whisper carried on something I couldn't see. I blinked, looking around the room, half expecting to find something that had made the sound. But it was just me. Just the house. Just the echo. I swallowed, shifting slightly in my seat, but it followed. I don't know if I was right. That one landed differently. Not as a statement. As a question. And somehow, it felt like she wasn't asking herself anymore. It felt like she was asking me. My chest tightened, slow and steady. Because I didn't have an answer. Not one that felt certain. Not one that felt enough. I pressed my fingers together, trying to ground myself in something solid, but her words kept moving through me, threading into places I hadn't opened before. I carried it so they wouldn't have to. I closed my eyes. And for a moment, I could see her. Not clearly. Not fully. Just the outline of her presence, the way she used to sit, the slight tilt of her head when she listened, the pause before she spoke like she was choosing something carefully every time. That wasn't gone. It was here. In these words. In me. I hope you understand. That one stayed the longest. It didn't fade. Didn't soften. It just lingered. And I felt it settle deep, somewhere I couldn't easily reach or move. Because understanding wasn't simple. It wasn't clean. It didn't erase anything. But it changed how everything felt. I opened my eyes slowly, the room coming back into focus, but her voice didn't disappear with it. It stayed in the background. Quiet. Steady. Like something that had been passed down, without ever being spoken out loud. It didn't feel sharp anymore. That was the first thing I noticed. The shock had edges, hard, cutting, impossible to hold without bleeding from it. But now, those edges had softened. Not gone. Just worn down into something quieter. Heavier. I sat there, the diary closed in my hands, my thumbs resting along its spine, feeling the worn leather under my skin. The weight of it didn't surprise me anymore. I expected it now. I breathed in slowly, deeper than before, and this time it didn't catch halfway. It settled. Stayed. Because the questions had changed. It wasn't, why did she do it, anymore. It was, how did she live with it? That difference, it shifted everything. I leaned back slightly, the chair creaking low beneath me, and let my thoughts move without trying to stop them. She woke up every day. Sat at that same table. Looked at the same people. Carried the same truth. And still chose to smile. To cook. To listen. To hold everything together like nothing inside her was pulling in two directions. That wasn't simple. That wasn't easy. That was something else. Something I hadn't given enough weight to before. My chest tightened again, but not with confusion this time. With recognition. Because now I could see the effort behind it. The quiet strength it must have taken to keep choosing that life, over and over again, without letting it spill into everything else. I exhaled slowly, my gaze drifting across the room, but not really seeing it. Just feeling. Because this wasn't about uncovering something anymore. It was about understanding what it meant. Not just for her. But for me. What do you do with a truth like this? How do you carry it without letting it change you in ways you can't undo? I looked down at the diary again, my fingers resting lightly against it. It didn't feel like an answer anymore. It felt like a question. One that didn't need to be solved right away. One that just needed to be sat with. And for the first time since I opened it, I wasn't afraid of that. I caught it in the smallest moment. Not while reading. Not while thinking. Just standing there. My mother asked me something, simple, ordinary, and for a second, I almost answered the way I always had. Easy. Automatic. Light. But something stopped me. Not hesitation. Awareness. I heard the space between her words. Felt the weight behind them. And for the first time, I didn't rush to fill it. I paused. Really paused. The kind she used to take. The kind I never noticed before. My answer came slower. Careful. Not because I was hiding anything, but because I understood now how much can live inside what isn't said. She looked at me for a moment longer than usual. Just a second. But I saw it. That flicker. That recognition. Like she noticed something had shifted, even if she didn't know what. My chest tightened slightly, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was new. I moved through the rest of the day differently after that. Quieter. Not withdrawn. Just aware. Of tones. Of pauses. Of the way conversations bend around certain things without ever touching them. And I found myself doing it too. Choosing words more carefully. Letting silence sit instead of breaking it. Not out of fear. But out of understanding. That everything doesn't need to be said the moment it exists. That some things need space first. I leaned against the doorway later, watching the house settle into its usual rhythm, the low hum of voices, the soft creak of the floor, the quiet comfort of things staying as they are. But I wasn't the same inside it anymore. Something had shifted. Not broken. Not lost. Just rearranged. I felt older in a way that didn't have anything to do with time. Like I had stepped into something that had always been there, but hadn't belonged to me until now. And the strangest part. It didn't feel like something I could step back out of. Because once you start seeing the weight behind things, you don't go back to carrying them lightly. I stood there with it in my hands. Not the diary. The decision. It didn't feel like a thought anymore. It felt like something physical, something I could almost touch, heavy and solid, sitting right in the middle of my chest. Say it. Or don't. That was it. No middle ground. No soft way around it. I walked slowly across the room, the floor creaking beneath my steps, each sound louder than it should have been. Like the house was reminding me that everything here had held together because certain things were never spoken. I stopped by the doorway, looking out at them. My mother was at the table. My father in his usual chair. Daniel leaning back slightly, listening more than talking. Everything, exactly as it had always been. That was the hardest part. Nothing looked broken. Nothing demanded to be fixed. And yet, I knew what lived underneath it all. My grip tightened slightly against the edge of the doorframe. Because I could change this. Right now. With a few words. I could shift the ground beneath all of us. Make everything visible. Make everything real. My breath slowed, but my chest stayed heavy. Because the question wasn't just about truth anymore. It was about consequence. About what happens after. Would it bring clarity? Or just pain? Would it free them? Or take something from them they had learned to live without? I don't think it would fix anything. Her words came back, not as a warning, but as a weight. A truth she had already carried to its end. I looked at them again. Really looked. The small gestures. The quiet understanding. The way everything moved, not perfectly, but steadily. And something inside me settled. Not fully. Not easily. But enough. I stepped back slightly, the decision not loud, not dramatic. Just made. Because sometimes holding the truth is an action too. And in that moment, I chose silence. It slipped out before I could stop it. Not the truth. Just a question. Small enough to pass as nothing. Careful enough to not break anything open. Do you ever think people carry things they don't talk about? My voice sounded normal. Too normal. Like it didn't belong to the weight sitting behind it. My mother looked up first. Just a glance. Quick. But I saw it. That pause. That flicker. Her hand stilled for half a second over the table, fingers resting lightly against the edge of her cup. Then she moved again, smooth, practiced. Everyone does, I think. Her tone stayed soft. Even. But it didn't move past the surface. Not yet. I nodded slightly, like that answer was enough. Like I hadn't asked something that carried more than it showed. My father shifted in his chair, not looking at me directly, just listening. The way he always did. Quiet. Present. But never stepping into the center of anything. That's just part of life, he added. Simple. Final. The kind of sentence that closes a door without making it obvious it was ever open. I swallowed slowly, my fingers curling lightly against my palm beneath the table. Because I felt it now. The edges of something just beneath the surface. Not breaking through. But there. Close. Daniel didn't speak. But I caught the way his eyes lifted briefly, just for a moment, meeting mine before moving away again. That look. It held something. Not knowing. But sensing. The same quiet awareness that had always been there. I leaned back slightly, letting the conversation move on, letting the moment pass without pulling at it any further. No one asked me why I brought it up. No one pushed. And I didn't either. But something had shifted. Just enough. A small ripple. Barely visible. But real. I could feel it lingering in the air, subtle but present, like a question that hadn't been fully answered, only set aside. And as I sat there, listening to the familiar rhythm of their voices returning, I realized something. I hadn't broken anything. But I had touched it. And now. I knew exactly where it lived. It was almost nothing. That's what made it impossible to ignore. We were still sitting there, the conversation drifting back into its usual rhythm, safe topics, familiar tones, the kind of easy flow that never brushes too close to anything real. But I wasn't listening the same way anymore. I was watching. My mother smiled at something my father said, nodding softly, her voice light as she responded. Everything looked normal. It sounded normal. Until I saw it. Her hand. It tightened slightly around the cup she was holding. Not enough for anyone to comment on. Not enough to stop the conversation. But enough. Her fingers pressed just a little too firmly, the knuckles paling for a brief second before she loosened her grip again, setting the cup down carefully like nothing had happened. I felt it in my chest immediately. That small shift. That quiet reaction. Because it came right after my question. Not during. Not obvious. But just close enough to be connected. She had heard it. Really heard it. And for a moment, something inside her had responded before she could smooth it over. I kept my face still, my posture relaxed, not letting anything show. But inside, everything sharpened. Because that wasn't just a gesture. That was confirmation. Not of the whole truth. Not of everything I knew. But of something. Something she carried. Something she recognized in what I had said. Across the table, my father continued talking, unaware, or maybe just choosing not to see it. Daniel stayed quiet again, but his gaze flickered briefly toward her hand, then away. Did he notice? Or was it just instinct? I couldn't tell. But I felt it. That invisible thread running through the room, pulling certain things tight while everything else stayed loose. I leaned back slightly, letting the moment pass, letting her regain that calm she always carried so well. And just like that, it was gone. The grip. The tension. The crack in the surface. But I had seen it. Felt it. And once you catch something like that, you don't forget where it lives. It crept back in when everything went quiet again. Not loud. Not sudden. Just there. A slow, familiar whisper that slipped in between thoughts and settled before I could push it away. What if I got it wrong? I sat there, staring at nothing in particular, the room dim around me, shadows stretching along the walls like they had more to say than I did. Her hand tightening around the cup. That moment. I had felt it. Seen it. But now, doubt pressed in. What if it wasn't what I thought? What if it was just a gesture? A random shift? A coincidence I turned into something bigger because I was already looking for it? My chest tightened slightly, not from panic, but from uncertainty. Because once doubt enters, it doesn't stay small. It spreads. Touches everything. Reaches back into what you thought you understood and starts asking questions you can't easily answer. The diary. Her words. The connections I had made. Were they real? Or had I filled in the spaces myself? I ran a hand through my hair slowly, exhaling under my breath. Because I wanted it to be clear. I wanted it to make sense. But it didn't. Not fully. Not in a way that sat still long enough to be certain. And maybe that was the truth of it. Not clean. Not fixed. Just shifting. I thought about her again. The way she wrote. Careful. Measured. Never saying more than she needed to. Maybe even in those pages, she had left things out. Softened edges. Changed the shape of things just enough to live with them. And here I was, trying to build something solid out of pieces that were never meant to be complete. I leaned back slowly, the chair creaking beneath me, grounding me just enough to stay present. Because certainty. It wasn't coming. Not like this. And for the first time, I wondered if the truth I thought I had found was only part of something I still didn't fully understand. It wasn't a record anymore. That's what I finally understood. Not just pages. Not just words. It was a weight she couldn't carry out loud, so she placed it somewhere it could exist without breaking everything around her. I ran my hand slowly over the cover, feeling the worn edges, the faint roughness where time had pressed into it. It smelled like old paper and something deeper, something lived in. This wasn't just her story. It was the version she could survive with. The version she could write. And maybe, the only one she could leave behind. I thought about everything I had read. The truths. The half-truths. The things she said clearly, and the things she circled without ever naming directly. It wasn't complete. It was never meant to be. It was shaped. Carefully. Intentionally. Like everything else she had done. My chest tightened slightly, but it didn't feel heavy in the same way anymore. It felt grounded. Because I wasn't looking for answers now. I was seeing something else. A life lived between choices. Between truth and silence. Between love and consequence. And this. This was where she let it exist fully. Not in the world. Not in the family. But here. Contained. Held. I exhaled slowly, my fingers resting still against the cover. Because the diary didn't tell me everything. It couldn't. But it told me enough. Enough to see her. Not just as someone who made a mistake. But as someone who carried it. Lived with it. And found a way to keep going anyway. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting that settle. Because maybe that's what this really was. Not a confession. Not a warning. But a trace. A quiet, human record of what it means to live with something you can't undo, and still choose to love through it. And somehow, that felt more real than any truth I had been searching for. It didn't settle all at once. It came in pieces. Quiet ones. The kind that don't announce themselves, they just ease into place when you stop fighting them. I sat there with the diary closed, my hands resting on top of it, not gripping anymore. Just there. Like I didn't need to hold it tightly to understand what it carried. The truth wasn't clean. That part was clear now. It didn't line up in a way that made anyone entirely right, or entirely wrong. It moved. Shifted. Changed depending on where you stood. And maybe that's what made it real. I thought about her again. Not the choices. Not the mistakes. Just her. A person standing in the middle of something she couldn't undo, trying to move forward without letting it tear everything apart. That wasn't simple. It wasn't even fair. But it was human. My chest rose slowly with a deeper breath, one that didn't feel forced anymore. Because I wasn't trying to solve it now. I wasn't trying to decide who deserved what. I was just seeing it. All of it. The love that existed. The silence that protected it. The damage that came with it. None of it erased the other. That was the part one hadn't understood before. I had been trying to separate them. To pick one side. But they weren't separate. They lived together. Always had. I hope you can hold both. Her words came back softly, not as a request this time, but as something I had already started doing. And it didn't feel like a burden anymore. Not entirely. It felt like something heavier than that. But steadier. Like something I could carry without it breaking me. I let my fingers slide lightly across the cover, feeling the texture beneath my skin. Because this wasn't about finding peace in what happened. It was about making space for it. Letting it exist without needing it to be different. And in that quiet moment, I realized something. Acceptance doesn't mean it makes sense. It just means you stop needing it to. It didn't leave all at once. The anger. It loosened. Slow. Like a grip I didn't realize I was still holding until my fingers started to ache. I sat there, staring at nothing in particular, the diary resting beside me now instead of in my hands. That felt different. Lighter. Not because it weighed less, but because I wasn't clinging to it the same way. I exhaled, long and steady. And for the first time, it didn't feel forced. The sharp edges had dulled. Not gone. Just worn down by everything I had seen, everything I had felt, everything I had finally allowed myself to understand. I thought about her again. But this time, the first feeling wasn't anger. It was tiredness. Not mine. Hers. A kind of quiet exhaustion that comes from carrying something too long without ever putting it down. And suddenly, holding on to anger felt heavier than what she had carried. That surprised me. I shifted slightly, my shoulders dropping, tension I hadn't noticed slowly releasing from places I didn't know were tight. Because anger had been easy, in a way. It gave everything shape. Direction. Someone to blame. But now. There wasn't just one place to put it. It spread too wide. Touched too many parts. And slowly, it started to fade. Not because it wasn't deserved. But because it didn't fit anymore. Not with everything else I understood now. I pressed my palm lightly against the surface beside me, feeling the cool wood, grounding myself in something simple. Something present. Because this wasn't about excusing anything. It wasn't about forgetting. It was about releasing the part of it that kept me stuck in one place. I let out another breath, softer this time. And something inside me shifted again. Not dramatically. Not all at once. Just enough. Enough to know. I didn't need to carry it the same way anymore. It didn't fall away in one clean moment. It loosened. Like a knot that had been pulled tight for so long it forgot how to open, and then, little by little, it remembered. I was standing by the window when I felt it. The late light slipping through the glass, warm but fading, catching the dust in the air. Everything looked softer in that kind of light. Edges blurred. Shadows stretched. Even inside me. I thought about her again. Not the choices. Not the lies. Just her. Sitting at that table. Hands folded. Carrying something she never set down. And for the first time, I didn't feel that sharp heat rise in my chest. I felt something else. A quiet understanding. Not full. Not perfect. But enough to take the edge off. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding, my shoulders dropping slightly, like something inside me had finally decided to rest. Because anger, it had weight. It pressed down. Kept everything tense. And now, it didn't have the same place to sit anymore. It didn't fit the whole picture. Not with everything I knew. Not with everything I felt. I leaned my forehead lightly against the glass, the coolness grounding me, pulling me back into the moment. Because this wasn't about letting her off the hook. It wasn't about pretending it didn't hurt. It was about choosing not to hold on to something that kept me tied to a single version of the story. A smaller version. I closed my eyes for a second. And in that quiet, I felt it. Not gone. But lighter. Like something I could set down without losing anything important. Like something I didn't have to carry into every thought, every memory, every moment moving forward. I stepped back from the window slowly, the room settling around me again. And for the first time, the space inside me felt just a little more open. Not empty. Just free enough to breathe. It wasn't the secret that stayed. That's what surprised me. I thought it would be the loudest thing she left behind, the part that would echo the longest, sit the heaviest, shape everything that came after. But it wasn't. It was quieter than that. Stronger in a different way. I saw it in the small things first. The way my mother folded a towel with care, smoothing the edges like it mattered more than it should. The way my father fixed something broken without being asked, without making a point of it. The way we all stayed. Through things we didn't fully understand. Through spaces that never quite filled. That didn't come from the secret. That came from her. From the way she held everything together, even when it cost her something no one else could see. I could still hear her laugh in the back of my mind, soft, steady, never too loud. The way she made space for everyone without ever asking for much in return. That was real. That hadn't changed. My chest tightened slightly, but not with pain this time. With recognition. Because she didn't just leave behind a story. She left behind a way of being. Of choosing love even when it wasn't simple. Of carrying things without letting them harden you. Of holding people close, even when parts of you had to stay hidden to do it. I sat there, letting that settle, feeling it move through me in a way the truth never quite had. Because the secret explained things. But this was what remained. The quiet strength. The patience. The way she built something that lasted, even if it wasn't perfect. I rested my hand lightly against the table, feeling the familiar grain beneath my fingertips. Because in the end, what she left behind wasn't just what she did. It was how she loved. And somehow, that felt bigger than everything she never said. I didn't notice the change right away. It showed up in the way I paused. In the way I listened. In the way I didn't rush to fill silence anymore. Before, I used to move through conversations like they were something to get through. Quick responses. Easy laughter. Words that came without much weight behind them. Now, everything felt slower. Not heavy. Just considered. I caught myself the other day, standing in the kitchen, watching my mother speak. Not just hearing her, but listening to what sat underneath her words. The tone. The hesitation. The things she chose not to say. And instead of brushing past it, I stayed with it. That was new. I felt it in myself too. The urge to speak less. But mean more. To not react immediately. To let things settle before deciding what they actually were. My chest felt different these days. Still. Not empty. Just steady. Like something inside me had found a place to stand without needing everything around it to make sense first. I thought about the diary again. Not as something that broke me. But as something that shifted me. Opened something I hadn't known was closed. Because now, I could hold more than one truth at once. I could see someone clearly, without needing them to be perfect. I could feel hurt, without letting it turn into something that defined everything else. That wasn't something I had before. I stepped outside later that evening, the air cooler, quieter, the world moving at its own pace without asking anything from me. And I realized. I wasn't trying to fix the story anymore. I wasn't trying to rewrite it. I was just living with it. Letting it exist. Letting it shape me in ways I didn't need to control. Because growth didn't feel like becoming something new. It felt like becoming more aware of what was already there. And finally, knowing how to carry it. It isn't clean. That's what I know now. Truth doesn't arrive in a straight line, doesn't sit neatly in one place where you can point to it and say, this is it, this is everything. It moves. It bends. Sometimes it hides inside love. Sometimes it stands right next to it. I used to think family meant knowing. Knowing who people were. Knowing where you stood. Knowing that what you saw was the whole picture. But it isn't. It never was. I can see that now in the way the house breathes at night, the quiet creaks settling into the walls, like it's holding years of things that were never said out loud. And still, it stands. Still holds. Still feels like home. My chest rises slowly, the air steady, no longer catching the way it used to when everything first came apart. Because this isn't about choosing between truth and love. It's about understanding that sometimes, they exist side by side, even when they don't fit together the way you want them to. I think about her. About all of them. Not as pieces of a story I need to solve anymore. But as people. Complicated. Flawed. Trying in their own ways to hold on to something that mattered. And maybe that's what family really is. Not perfection. Not clarity. But connection. Even when it's layered. Even when it carries things you'll never fully understand. I rest my hand against the table, feeling the familiar grain beneath my fingertips, grounding myself in something simple, something real. Because the truth didn't break us. It just showed me we were never as simple as I believed. And somehow, that doesn't make the love smaller. It makes it deeper. It isn't clean. That's what I know now. Truth doesn't arrive in a straight line, doesn't sit neatly in one place where you can point to it and say, this is it, this is everything. It moves. It bends. Sometimes it hides inside love. Sometimes it stands right next to it. I used to think family meant knowing. Knowing who people were. Knowing where you stood. Knowing that what you saw was the whole picture. But it isn't. It never was. I can see that now in the way the house breathes at night, the quiet creaks settling into the walls, like it's holding years of things that were never said out loud. And still, it stands. Still holds. Still feels like home. My chest rises slowly, the air steady, no longer catching the way it used to when everything first came apart. Because this isn't about choosing between truth and love. It's about understanding that sometimes, they exist side by side, even when they don't fit together the way you want them to. I think about her. About all of them. Not as pieces of a story I need to solve anymore. But as people. Complicated. Flawed. Trying in their own ways to hold on to something that mattered. And maybe that's what family really is. Not perfection. Not clarity. But connection. Even when it's layered. Even when it carries things you'll never fully understand. I rest my hand against the table, feeling the familiar grain beneath my fingertips, grounding myself in something simple, something real. Because the truth didn't break us. It just showed me we were never as simple as I believed. And somehow, that doesn't make the love smaller. It makes it deeper.